Hello, everyone. This is Apostate Aladdin, and I'm joined by Secular Spirit today. This is a stream that I've had a couple iterations of this before. I've done this with Infidel Noodle as well, where we take calls from believers, in this case, not only Muslims, but believers of all faiths. You can tell us what you believe and why you believe that it is the truth. The stream is not about you convincing us per se or us convincing you that you're wrong or anything. We just want to uh, get an insider's view on your faith. You are the best one who can describe to us why you find it to be the truth. So yeah, I want to begin by giving Secular Spirit the mic. Go ahead and tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you so much,
Mm.
Aladdin or Aladdin, whatever you prefer. I've been looking forward to doing this for a while. We've been talking about doing something for a few months now. And so it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure.
And yeah, so I'm an ex-Muslim. I grew up in the Middle East and I left Islam when I was 18. And I wanted to just share my perspective on why I left and why I think Islam is problematic in a lot of ways, how it impacted me negatively and how it impacted so many people around the world. So I started posting my story on social media, and I've been doing that for 2 years and kind of expand from there and talk about how I lead my life in a secular way and maybe explore what a secular life is and what potential that has. I started my YouTube channel, Secular Spirits. So you can find me there at Secular Spirits, and you can find me at Secular Spirits on Twitter and Instagram too. Yeah.
Thanks for that overview. And I want to highlight the fact that you talk about topics that I don't necessarily or haven't gotten to yet, like what is secularism, I suppose, what is life like as a secularist. So I appreciate that you're doing that, and I hope that everybody, gives this channel, a shot. Go down in the description. There's a link for his channel. Check it out. And I'm going to be streaming with you about the same time next week.
Yeah.
And the topic would be the Sahaba, and that's kind of not really about secularism, but it'll be a fun stream.
No. Yeah. I should mention that I haven't really gone like very in depth in the secularism stuff yet. I'm
Mhm.
kind of starting by introducing my thoughts on Islam and other religions, and I'm going to kind of grow in there. I just always noticed that within the ex-Muslim community and maybe even the atheist community in general, there's a lot of criticism about religion, but not enough talk about what replaces it. And I think that's very important, especially when you're talking to theists who say, well, how do I find meaning in life without my
Mhm.
religion? And how do atheists find meaning in life? So I think it's important to talk about those things.
I completely agree. Yeah. All right, we're gonna start by taking Robert. I'll take you in 3 seconds. Three, 2, 1. Hey, Robert, how's it going?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Hi,
Can you
Robert.
hear me?
I wasn't expecting that. I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I probably shouldn't have said I'm here to talk about Judaism. I am, because a lot of my beliefs are based in Judaism, because I am Jewish. That's my religion. I do have a lot of religious beliefs. Most of them come from Judaism. Well, I wouldn't say most of them. I'd say like about 50%. But I have a lot of beliefs about God, about the world, about religion. I'm not
Feel
sure
free to
where to
share those.
start.
Yeah.
Maybe with God.
Sure.
What do I
Sure.
believe about God? I believe in an immanent divinity rather than a transcendent divinity. So I don't believe. So a transcendent divinity basically is that God is a being that's above and separate from the universe, whereas an immanent divinity is one where God is the universe. So that's how I view God. Kind of similar
Okay.
to the Alavis, actually, in my belief about God. How basically, you know of the Alavis, right?
The Alawiya, I think they're called
Yeah,
in
I think
English.
that's what she's referring to.
The Alawiya are Syrian, but yeah, they believe a similar thing to the Alavis. But yeah, so that's what I believe. That's the belief of God that makes the most sense to me.
Sorry, can you repeat it for a second? You said there's imminent, and what was the other one?
Transcendent.
Transcendent. Okay.
Yeah, so the immanent divinity makes so much more sense to me.
And why is that?
Because think of it, it just seems like weird and not, I don't want to say nonsensical, but yeah, a little nonsensical that there's like one singular being controlling everything, a higher power. I believe in a lower power. You could say almost. Yeah, I just the idea of like the man in the sky kind of idea doesn't make sense because it just seems far-fetched.
Well, how did you come to believe that your version, this immanent, I think is transcendent deity,
Imminent, yeah,
is
imminent,
is
yeah.
the less far-fetched one, or not even less far-fetched, but the correct one or most likely one?
I don't believe in referring to my religious beliefs as the correct one because I think that either one could be correct at the end of the day, and I can't really go to people and say, oh, I'm right. This is just, to me, the reason why I believe in an immanent divinity is because you don't even necessarily need to be religious to believe that the universe is one continuous being. It's just the difference between me and a religious person, or the difference between me and an atheist that believes the universe is a one continuous being is that I believe that there is spirituality embedded into it, and they necessarily don't.
Well, I want to clarify something.
Yeah.
When Secular Spirit was asking you about uh, why do you believe it is the truth, I don't think we mean why do you assert that it's the truth, to other people. It's not about challenging their beliefs or, saying that they're wrong, but as
Like, why do
in,
I believe I'm right? You mean?
yeah, but it's not necessarily about being right and wrong versus other people. It's just what makes it make sense to you.
Oh, like, okay, so what's the logic or thought process behind why I believe this?
Yeah. You can also say why other versions, don't make sense, but it's primarily about yours.
Yeah, I prefer to defend my own position than to like attack
Yeah.
like someone else's. But
And it's not necessarily an attack. It's
oh
just
yeah,
you
but
describing like
I'd rather like support my own like beliefs. But,
yeah. Or it's more like this is what I'm trying to say. It's more like if you examined this one and other ones, which I presume is that how you arrived at it? Like you looked at a bunch of different ideas, what made sense about this one, and perhaps what didn't make sense about the other one. You could add that.
oh yeah, I have. Well, I'll actually tell you the day that I came to this realization. It's gonna sound really silly, but bear with me.
No, don't worry
Yeah,
about
go
that.
ahead.
I did shrooms.
Okay.
And when you do shrooms, you have this experience called an ego death, where you know how normally you are an individual that's an observer and you understand that your body is separate from the rest of the world and that it's its own unit. So when you do shrooms, that completely breaks down. And so you kind of feel like you become one with the universe. And it just felt very spiritual and very divine. And I just don't think that, like, basically, I guess what I'm really more concerned about emphasizing is the oneness of the universe. I believe in the oneness of the universe. And the reason why I believe, because I believe that the universe is just one contiguous being, it doesn't make sense to think of a being outside of that being unless you consider something like multiverse theory, which I'm open to. Oh, it's him, not her. Yeah. But yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense? Or am I answering the question like to satisfactorily?
So I'm just curious to know, maybe just understand how this impacts you a bit more.
Oh, how it impacts me?
Yeah, like how, so you have this belief of that there's this oneness that we're all part of, I guess.
Yeah.
How does that impact your life if compared to if you didn't have this belief?
So it's really hard for me to, well, actually, no, it's simple. The way that this belief impacts me is that, well, this is going to sound like probably very like boring, but I do really, 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 really try to get into the mindset of others. I mean, it's not like something I have to put enormous effort into, because in my field, my discipline, which is linguistics, I do that a lot. And so really what the biggest takeaway from this view of the universe is also how I view humanity. Humanity is much more interconnected than it seems, or than we might believe. And yeah, that does inform a lot about how I interact with people and how I interact with new ideas. Is that I kind of recognize this single source, this original source, and when I all go back to it, it makes sense to me.
Okay.
And then
Is it okay if I just ask you another question to just
yeah,
clarify a bit
go
more?
ahead. Go ahead.
So as part of this belief, then, would it be accurate to say that you believe that everything that happens in the universe is part of this
Yeah,
immanence,
absolutely.
transcendent thing? So
Yeah.
all
Everything
the
comes from God, good and bad. Yeah.
all good and bad, all the suffering, all the happiness, it's all from the same.
Yeah.
I don't know if you do use the word source, but it just is.
Yeah, source. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, you mentioned that you wanted to talk about Judaism
Yeah.
before. How does that connect in your mind to the Abrahamic religions, or just, the traditional concept of a god?
Yeah, well, the way that it fits into Judaism, actually, it turns out that I didn't know this until I came to that realization, which is that a lot of Jews believe it not the exact same thing, but a similar thing, and they emphasize scripture passed down by people rather than the idea of, or at least the branch of Judaism that I belong to, which is the conservative movement, emphasizes a lot more of the texts handed down by people rather than the idea that we've received something from the divine. Of course, people believe that, certainly, and I'd say that that's the main prevailing belief, that we believe that we inherited something from the divine. But I am similar to other Jews in the sense that I do believe that religion is somewhat of a man-made thing. It's more like our interpretation of the universe. And so, yeah, I would say, but it does differ, because obviously most Jews believe in the transcendent God.
So how would you, I know
yeah?
it's difficult to add labels to it, but
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
how would you call it in general? Like, with whatever qualifiers you need, what would you label yourself as, or your belief as?
Like my religious beliefs?
Yeah.
Oh, I identify as Jewish, yeah.
Jewish, okay.
Yeah. And I would say that, like, most of my beliefs about, like, afterlife, for example, or views on other religions, I would say are somewhat similar, yeah. But most of the, like, because the thing about Judaism, it's not super belief based. It's more about your practice and the things you do on a daily basis. In fact, I've heard a lot of conservative rabbis argue that atheism is permissible in Judaism, because it's more about the practice and the upholding the tradition in some ways. But that's what they that's the way some people see it.
And do you practice a lot of the different things that,
like the traditional rituals, you mean? Yeah, I do. Yeah, definitely. I guess you could say I'm kind of doing that right now, because it's actually early in the morning on Saturdays that I usually go to Torah study, and so that's probably what I'm going to do after this. And so, yeah, but there's that. I do. I try to squeeze in the daily prayers when I can. There's 3, not 5, and they're a little more flexible. I keep the Sabbath. And I practice holidays, things like that. I do a lot of learning, there are so many different Jewish languages. I love learning about Jewish languages. And I like learning about other religions too, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did have one question for you that came to mind.
Yeah.
So me speaking as an atheist,
Yeah.
I've also had experiences on shrooms. And I understand when you talk about the ego death and this feeling of being connected to everything. And I think it does make sense to just view us all as being connected and part of this one thing.
Mm-hmm.
What I was curious to know is, how did you determine that you should add on top of that belief the practices, the commands, the restrictions of Judaism, the traditions of Judaism. Like why that opposed to just doing what I'm doing, where I don't practice any religion or anything else?
Because it's the one that I enjoy the most. I do have a spiritual desire, and for me, that spiritual desire is in a lot of ways connected to ritual, like I said, and also to people. Like I said, learning languages is an act of worship for me. I really, really enjoy doing prayers, things like that. And this, of course, ends up meaning that I don't usually do the things I don't like keeping kosher. I had bacon for breakfast this morning. But anyway,
Okay.
so yeah, it means I end up not doing the things that I don't enjoy as much. Yeah, so it's because that's the one I enjoy the most. I've studied a lot of different religions. I've practiced other religions when I was younger. And this is the one that I enjoy the most and that I feel the most spiritually satisfied with. That I feel good practicing.
Okay.
Yeah, and then another, there are a lot of things about Judaism that I prefer over other religions. And that's what led me to choose it.
Okay. I have a few questions, and to the people in the comments, they've been asking some questions, and I'll take those at the end.
Yeah.
So one of my first questions is, so you said that you follow some of these or believe in some of what you said because you prefer it over other religions.
Yeah.
So did you approach it with the intention to, is there like an ultimate truth out there that you're trying to find? Or is it more like you're trying to find what works and makes sense for you, and you don't actually know what is the ultimate truth?
Oh,
That's a good question.
It's definitely both, because every single person has to have their own path and their own way. But then again, there are things that that do like bind us all. That are, I would say, the search for the ultimate truth. I don't really go to religion for that because I don't find it there. My ultimate truths I look for when I'm studying, when I'm reading, for example, when I'm studying languages, when I'm studying, whatever I'm studying in school, like physics or whatever. That's how I more answer like bigger questions, because I think that, yeah, although there are some, like, of course, bigger questions that I do get from religion and culture as well.
I think the reason why, in my mind, for me at least, the way that I would go about this is trying to find the ultimate truth is because I've had this idea drilled into my head that if you find the wrong ultimate, or if you believe in the wrong ultimate truth, you will get punished for it. So I suppose if that idea is not something that you believe in, it's not extremely consequential to be, to find the absolute, if that even exists, objective truth, behind all of this. Is that what I'm getting here? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
and actually the majority of, like, because of course our view of what religion does is very skewed towards Christianity, Islam, and even Judaism, and like the bigger religions. But before those religions began, growing empires taking over the world, most religions were like that. There wasn't this idea that our religion is the truth. Of course, they did have like cultural myths and beliefs that that they were like, yes, this is definitely true. But there is less of a universalist view in most religions. Yeah.
That's very interesting to me because, yeah, my default view was that people would have to believe that it's, the ultimate truth or not the ultimate truth. So it's interesting to know this because it wouldn't be something that would have come to my awareness if it wasn't, for that chat. So I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, and actually, in the city where I live, which is Winnipeg, there's a large Indigenous population, and I know a lot of full out atheists who do they do the whole all of the ceremonies, all of the rituals, but that's because it's not a theistic religion, really. It's not really super deep. In fact, I don't really know of any of my native friends who actually do believe in God as per their religion. But that's again just because that's the way our religions are. They're a little bit different. But yeah.
I've got a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Well, the first one's kind of a comment. I feel a little bit of hesitation from you when you're trying to share something, thinking that we might find it, boring or not convincing. Or
Yeah.
I hope you realize you shouldn't feel that, especially in this space, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I'm not trying to challenge your view per se. I mean, maybe I will a little bit to see, what do you think of the opposing view, but we just care about knowing what you believe more than anything. So don't feel like you have to justify it to anybody, especially when it's something that's inconsequential to other people and not harmful in any way. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah,
And,
the reason I react that way is because most people react like, what the hell?
Yeah.
That makes no sense. And then, but yeah, sure, yeah. So go ahead, keep asking.
Sure.
I'm curious.
Well, the last thing I wanted to ask is, so is Judaism to you, I know it's tied to identity and culture and ethnicity in many ways. Is that how you view it as well? Like,
Yeah,
is it
in
about
some ways.
community as well?
Yeah, definitely. Because like I said, learning the languages is an act of worship for me in a lot of ways, and that does require an ethnic connection, or at least a desire to seek one. And yeah, so it is like a part of my, like, I guess, cultural identity as well. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for answering that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had one last question for you, and
Yeah.
it was just to touch on something. Maybe I misunderstood what you said earlier.
Yeah.
But did you say that you believe that there's an afterlife?
No, I don't believe that there is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I believe in a, like, Lion King afterlife, I guess, where, like, we eat the antelopes
Yeah.
become the grass, and then the antelopes eat the grass or whatever. But
So kind of in the sense of like the atoms that are us become the atoms that are of something else.
yeah, like
after we die.
reincarnation, kind of, I guess you could say.
So is there any awareness in that reincarnation?
I have no idea, actually,
Okay.
because I really do not know how other animals or plants' consciousness works, or other, like, actually, yeah, this is part of, actually, this is another reason why I believe in immanent divinity, actually, is because of consciousness. I think that basically, because it's weird that I have a consciousness and that I'm viewing the universe, and that you're you. Like, it just blows my mind that, like, I'm me and you're you, and that, like, from your perspective. Anyway, the idea of consciousness and being an observer of the universe is, like, to me, the way I view it is like, how your heart, you can't choose to make your heart beat or stop beating, because it's involuntary. So it's maybe your heart has a consciousness of its own that it's, like, compulsively beating. And so the way that I see it, that, yeah, like, the changing from one atom to another is part of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
We can go to the questions that people have in the chat.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
bookmarked
sure.
a few of them. So Sass says, would you align yourself more towards an agnostic theist over a Jew, or does the belief you have align with Judaism regardless? I think you sort of answered that already.
Yeah,
right?
definitely Jewish. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Although agnostic, I would not be opposed to the label of agnostic. Yeah.
Okay.
Like, in the sense of, like, I believe that, but I don't know.
Okay. Link Bombchu says, I love everything she just said. I feel similar. Not really a question, but just wanted to echo that
Thanks.
sentiment.
Yeah, it's helpful to know that other people believe the same way. I was so shocked when I watched videos on Alavism and I found out that they believe the same thing about God that I do. So
Yeah,
that's why I like enjoying having these conversations and sharing, because I might learn something that I find interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I should mention, Robert, that what you just shared is something I've heard from many people as well. So I don't think it's that rare of a belief system. Maybe not specifically tied to Judaism, but the basic idea is pretty common.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And another question was he born Jewish?
No, I was born Catholic. And I converted. Yeah, I was born Catholic. I became an atheist like I was really young. I was like 7 or 8. Like I checked out right away. I was like, nope, this ain't it. But then again, I went to a Catholic school and I'm also LGBT, so that was hard. And yeah, the Jewish community is a lot more tolerant in that way. Oh my God, as of 2012, apparently conservative Judaism has now legalized same-sex marriage.
Interesting.
Which is interesting. So they're now performing same-sex marriage ceremonies, which is interesting. Although they don't perform interfaith marriage ceremonies, which is also interesting.
Yeah.
Although
that's the last bastion for
Yeah.
Judaism.
Although that's because it is a core belief of like keeping the community united. I personally don't believe that that's mutually exclusive with marrying outside the faith. Like my partner is not Jewish, for example. But yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And the last question that I see here, let's see, what makes him think that Judaism is true? I just want your like a little bit of a commentary on this. Looking at Judaism, it's purely pro-Israel. Can blacks be or Chinese be Jews? First of all, do you think it is purely pro-Israel? And also, can blacks or Chinese people be Jews?
So I think that the passages regarding the specialness of the land of Israel make it really easy to justify Zionism. But I find it difficult to see Judaism as the pro-Israel religion, given the fact that the most religious Jews among us, which are the Hasidim or the ultra-Orthodox Jews, are overwhelmingly by majority anti-Zionist. Oh, and just to be pedantic regarding Chinese and Black Jews. So there are... First of all, there are so many African Jews, the Ethiopian Jews, the North African Jews, the Lemba, and then actually there is a Jewish offshoot group in China called the Kaifeng Jews, and they're descended from Persian Jews who came there through the Silk Road hundreds or thousands of years ago. So yeah, the answer is yeah, Black people, Chinese people, you can convert, you can be born into a community that lives like among these communities. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for answering that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just speaking as a Palestinian myself, I don't think you could really say that Judaism as a religion is pro-Israel in the sense of pro the actions that have been undertaken in Israel by Israel against Palestinians, or whatever you want to call the bombing of children or whatever you want to say. But it's easy to co-opt the teachings of Judaism to do that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Judaism says that those things are okay to do.
Yeah, that's why I try not to get too upset when people associate Judaism with Israel, because it is a very natural, and the vast, except for like New York, obviously, the vast majority of Jews are now in Israel. So yeah, but luckily I grew up in New York, so I can access the large Jewish community every time I go back. Yeah.
Oh, one last thing before I let you go. Have you seen the series on Netflix called Unorthodox?
Yeah, I have. I've seen it. Yeah.
Do you have any like quick thoughts on that?
Oh my God, it was awful.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm used to like really good, balanced, like not tacky Orthodox representation. Like, oh, if you want to see a great Orthodox representation, it's this show called it's called Stiesel. It's really good. But the reason why I don't like Unorthodox is because it's very like it doesn't really humanize the Orthodox people very much. It really like caricaturizes them in a little bit. Like it does humanize them in some senses, but it did not feel very like, and a lot of my Orthodox friends have reflected that same comment, that it feels, but I understand, like it is the first Yiddish series on Netflix, so I am excited about that. I was happy about that, to see the Yiddish, and then also to see my hometown in a movie, no matter how many movies I see it in.
Just not in that light, I guess.
That's never enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I believe. Oh, actually, there's one thing, two things that I wanted to ask you while I have you before I go.
Sure.
One of them was actually, about the Alevis of Turkey, and how because they don't follow the Quran or the Hadiths, which I found interesting. They really just follow their own beliefs, I guess. But I don't know. I wanted to know if you see them as like a peaceful alternative, or if you know about like the Alavis, because there's a lot about them. And then the other one was a question, an Arabic related question about the word daraba. Doesn't that word daraba, I've heard it used also to mean to shoot a gun or an arrow?
Yeah, that's
It could,
like,
Yeah.
depending on the context.
Okay, yeah, because since we were talking about the other yesterday about like very stretched definitions of this word, that was another one that I was thinking of. But yeah, I would like to actually maybe someday hear you talk about the Alavis or the heterodox sects on your channel sometime, and how you view them in contrast to like Orthodox Islam.
Okay, Spirit, do you want to go ahead and talk about that? Do you have any thoughts about it?
Yeah. The interesting thing about the Alawites is they're very secretive, and they don't really promote their beliefs or their practices. And there's a lot of practices of theirs that are shrouded in secrecy. And so in many ways, it's unclear. Like I would say, within the general broad Islamic community, I think it's fair to say that a lot don't consider them to actually be Muslim. And I think it's open to debate whether they consider themselves to be Muslim or not. I think some do, some don't. In terms of if it's more of a peaceful alternative, I think it comes down to what the practices are specifically. Though those, I have to admit, I don't know very well, but I know that they're very tied to the tribal culture that's ingrained in the Middle East, and those can have pretty negative repercussions if you leave the fold, kind of like in the Mormon sense, or if you go against the majority or what the leaders, the elders say. So in that sense, it can be a pretty negative practice.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing that.
Wait, I have a couple of thoughts on that. And
Oh,
then
you have?
Yeah, go ahead.
There you go. Yeah. So first of all, yeah,
Oh,
I agree
also,
Sure.
sorry, you mentioned the Alawites. I was actually more mentioning the Alavis of Turkey, which are a separate. They both come from they both come from the same word, but yeah, they believe almost the same thing as the Alawites, because I think they came from the same core group at some point. But yeah, sorry, Aladdin, say what you were going to say.
Yeah, no, I was going to comment more about the Alawites. Pretty much what Secular Spirit said, and I just knew them as disbelievers. Like every time I asked about them, I would be told, yeah, that they're not even Muslim, and people leave it at that. Partly also because we don't even know that much about them, so it's not really an interest. I was going to comment on the peaceful part. So aside from the fact that I don't know them, I think because of the numbers, it's hard to tell. So when a religion or ideology is a bigger takes a bigger chunk of the population, their approach to things might change. The way that they handle laws or leaving the that community and so on, or whether they are persecuted or not, all of that affects what that peace will look like or lack of peace. So yeah, it's hard to comment on that, even if we did know more about them without seeing their numbers, like in a bigger community, what that would look like. So yeah, that's the last thought I had about that.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I should clarify that I was talking about the Alawites in
Oh,
Syria
yeah, okay.
specifically.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
Alavis, I don't know much about them.
Well, they're very similar in the sense that they're very occult and that they're very secretive. So yeah. Thank you for having me. Is that?
Yeah, that's
that
all
everything?
from my
Yeah.
end.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay. So
Thanks for
I'll
sharing.
give some time for the other callers. Yeah. All right. Okay. Have a good weekend. See you later.
Thanks.
You
You
too.
too, Robert. Bye-bye. Okay. Spirit, do you want me to call you Secular Spirit?
I don't know.
How do I shorten it?
I know. You could just call me Spirit or Alim. Alim works as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
Alim.
There was something I wanted to say before we get to the next caller, just kind of an observation of what Robert was sharing, if we've got the time.
Sure, yeah.
So like I mentioned before, I've heard this kind of version of belief in a general, I don't know if I would use the word abstract, but it's so overreaching, like this concept of a God that is basically the universe. So it's like saying God is the universe of everything. And personally, I don't find that to be particularly objectionable or a harmful belief, to believe we're all interconnected and we should all help each other and all that. What I find interesting, and I'm not saying Robert is doing this, but what I find interesting is when that somehow becomes the foundation of a religion with very specific claims and practices, commands and restrictions. So I always wonder, when the belief is so vague in general, how do we get to specifics like I shouldn't eat pork, or I should do this, or
I mean, the same way we went from monotheism to I shouldn't eat pork, right?
well, yeah, except it's more of a kind of a reach, because at least the monotheistic person believes that this God is an
Fair
active
point.
agent who's
Yeah.
you know what I mean. So my concern always is with these beliefs is they seem benign, or oh, what's wrong with that on the surface, but then you somehow get into, oh well, being LGBT is bad, obviously, because this particular strain of the way I worship the divine oneness of all says so. Again, not saying Robert is saying that. I'm just saying that I've encountered that in certain instances. So that's kind of my concern with the whole God is everything belief.
Well, I haven't yet. It doesn't concern me as a concept, the whole God is everything. But yeah, specificity, specifying, that's where we get to potential problems. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's good to specify. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to take the next caller, the perfect Dawah. There's another caller in the back as well. And here is I'm going to post the link again. It is actually pinned as a comment. So if you want to join, please feel free. Okay, the perfect Dawah, adding you in 3, 2, 1. Hi, how are you doing today?
Hello, hi, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. Finally, after a very long time, I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, actually, I have I have my live streams every Saturday, and usually I have it 7 o'clock Central European time. Last time somebody asked me, can you do it earlier, because my children sleep, and I don't know, he or she had questions. So I said, this time I will start at 5 o'clock. And because I saw that you start 4:30 Central European time. So I postponed
keep
it.
switching in times just
Yeah,
for everyone.
No, it's okay. But I postponed it to 5:30, half an hour later. And I was hoping that I'd be the first one. I would have almost 1 hour to talk, but now it's just 15 minutes. But
No, unfortunately, we can't keep it to an hour even.
No, I know. And as I said, if I was first, I would at least have time. Now I have just 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, we would aim for that anyway. So
yes, maybe if it is possible, once we can have special
possibly, yeah,
stream, yeah, because I would like to talk to somebody. Last week came to my channel and asked me about this.
Today we'll focus on like, what do you believe?
I understand. Yes, I understand. Yes, exactly. No, I said last week somebody came and asked me about the chapter 4, verse 34, and I was going to explain for him, and he said that you are going to have it, so maybe I can talk to you about that. And then it was in the middle of night. Swedish time.
It could be a topic for another stream.
Yes. No, I'm just going to tell you, it was middle of night Swedish time. That's why I couldn't talk to you at that time.
That's
anyway.
Okay.
Now I would like to tell you very fast that I'm born in a Muslim family, but I became atheist at the age of 25. So I don't believe that you can be born to a way of life because I believe Islam is also economic system, political system. So you cannot be born to such a religion. And I don't call myself ex-Muslim. So later, after many years, when I got better knowledge of different things, I realized that I was wrong. So I converted to Islam. So I don't like even revert to Islam. I don't accept that one. I believe that I converted to Islam. And I converted to Islam because I understood that God tried to solve our problems in the past. We have a lot of problems in the past, okay? He tried to solve them with his laws and his guidance. And but God didn't want to stop there to solve 5 or 10 or 15 or 20% of our problems. He wanted to solve every single problems we are facing on this planet. So if God cannot solve the problems we are facing on this planet today, like persecution, drugs, war, corruption, all these problems. If he cannot solve them, I say that I better follow a political, leader or a political party or who
So
can.
to clarify, you think that it's a political system is what
Yes,
Islam is?
political and economy system. Okay, because
So
if you
do you
want
have
to,
any beliefs about it being, the truth in any sense?
the truth is that if this this book can solve every single problems we are facing on this planet, then it couldn't be possible from an illiterate man 1400 years ago. So if he had, because I have found it, if he had that solution, which I have found it, okay, and I would love to explain about that, then that definitely is from no one but God. Okay.
Okay.
Because
So
yes,
today I don't want to get into specifics, but
yes,
to be
of course.
concise, it's you think that it is from God because it is the perfect political system that solves all the problems that we have, right?
Yes, economy and political system. Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Because for example,
I mean, that makes sense as in I understand your reasoning behind it, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I just say that, for example, if you have several different parties in a country, okay, and one party says that I can solve every single problems you are facing on this in this country, yeah. So we have to obviously, rationally, we have to follow it. Okay, it doesn't matter if that party is from God or from whomever, but if we see that they have the solution, yeah, they say that we fix your, problem in this way, like I don't know, in USA you have this what is it, welfare system. No,
I think
yeah.
you've made your point clear, which is this is the best system and therefore it must be from God. It couldn't have been from a man, just a regular man.
Yes,
Okay,
1400 years
that
ago.
makes sense. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add about that point?
It is very deep discussion, of course, yes.
Yeah.
I just would like that we can maybe decide another time talk if you would like.
Sure. I will. I haven't been able to get to my emails lately, but send me another one and we'll all talk to you offline.
I don't know if I have your email. Maybe you can put it in private chat. I can copy it, or
Sure.
if it is
okay. In the private chat, yeah.
Yes, and then, but anyway, if anybody else would like to talk to me, I go live in 10 minutes. So you are welcome, more than welcome to talk to me every Saturday.
All right. Thank you very much.
So please, I send you an email and I would love to talk to you about or even that chapter 4, verse 34.
Okay, well, that will be off the stream.
Yes,
right?
I know. Not now. I said the next one. Yeah, thank you very much.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Okay.
Well.
Yeah. That was a little chaotic.
Yeah, I'm glad we could plug his stream.
Yeah.
Brief visit.
So we've got NA was in the back. Unfortunately, I don't see NA anymore. If you're in the chat, please join again, and then I'll add you pretty much immediately. I wanted to give the Perfect Dawah a chance. I was told that he would probably ramble about something irrelevant, and maybe I should have listened to people, but I always want to give people a perfect shot. Anyhow, is there anything you have on your mind, Secular Spirit, as we wait for the next caller?
Yeah. I just wanted to say that I really love the idea that you did this as a call-in, like this live stream series with asking this question of why do you believe? Because I was just thinking about it, and how often do you ask someone that in your day-to-day life? It's even like, so I live in Canada now, but when I was living in the Middle East or living in Canada, it's kind of a rude, blunt, inappropriate question to ask someone why they believe. You can ask someone, "Oh, are you Catholic or are you whatever?" But to say, "Oh, why that?" It's like almost it can be perceived as an attack on someone's identity or trying to justify a core part of their belief. So it is nice, and I think it should just be part of normal day-to-day conversation. Just talk about these things because they are so important. They shouldn't be shielded or hidden or protected. And this is my theory. I suspect that a lot of people do have this protective sense of it because they know that a lot of it is not based on any strong footing, and they don't want to be in a position where they're justifying something they can't really justify well, especially if they haven't really thought about these things.
I mean,
So
you
that,
say they don't want to do that. I think it's more subconscious than
yes, yeah, I think
intentional,
it is subconscious, yeah. And so I think doing this is good as a practice, even for theists calling in or believers in a god, because it gives them the opportunity to actually think about why they believe, and like for themselves internally. And speaking as a Muslim for 18 years myself, I never did that. Like the question of why I believe didn't make sense, or I wouldn't say didn't make sense, but it wouldn't even occur to me because the question didn't make sense, because Allah was the reality, and me being Muslim was just the way things were.
I agree with that. I have 3 thoughts that I'm kind of losing track of. First of all, my experience with being asked about why I believe what I believe. Secondly, my experience with asking people about their beliefs in real life. And thirdly, I lost that plot, but I'll get to it in a
Okay.
second. And before that, someone is Nim Grace is asking, was SS born Muslim? So we're not going
I
to call
was,
him
yeah.
SS. I don't love that name. Do you want to be called SS? I don't know.
I don't personally care, but I remember when I
Okay.
was thinking of a name for the channel, someone mentioned, "Oh, well, your acronym is going to be SS," and it's like,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, he was. So what did I say? So the way that I was asked about this at some point, I had already had the questions that I did about Islam, and it wasn't about the validity of Islam. It was more like I can't reconcile, these concepts, or someone isn't able to explain them well enough. And even past that point, that's when I had my first conversations with an atheist, and my first experience was in Saudi Arabia. He was an atheist who was smug, like he was the internet type. Troll 16-year-old type of, oh, that's so stupid, bro. And it was really, really obnoxious. And despite that, like, we were friends in a sense, and that bothered me, but not to the point of being like, okay, I'm going to get so pissed off, I don't want to talk to you again. But it did close off my mind in many ways from continuing that thinking past the conversation. So I was giving him answers based on, it's not like they were answers that I was researching, okay, what would fill this gap. I wasn't even researching these things on the internet. It was just out of my mind. Like, he didn't give me a chance to notice that my answer was flawed, because he was so pushy about my answer being flawed, if that makes sense. So that approach is not helpful for him. It wasn't helpful for me either, to think critically about my beliefs. So I like the approach that I'm taking here, which is, like, I'm telling people, even if I think you're 100% wrong, as long as it's not harmful to people, I don't really care. And that's why if someone comes out here and starts justifying some bizarre things in Islam, I will still, like, let it slide a little bit, because at the end of the day, I've been clear about my beliefs, and people understand that, this is wrong. So there's no point in fighting per se. But if they keep pushing about it, maybe we'll, like, examine, help them think about it. And if that doesn't work, if they're being hostile, yeah, we might push it a little bit more. That's one thing. And okay, this is not intended as a flex. Actually, before we get to that, I can't pronounce that, but Asmahu, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate it. Yeah, so you were talking about in real life, asking people, well, I say real life, but, like, in another setting, I suppose, asking people about their beliefs. Why do you believe that? Not only what do you believe? It is kind of perceived as rude, and a lot of it has to do with people feeling vulnerable in that moment, or that it's a personal matter you shouldn't be talking about. In many parts of the world, it's not even talked about, because everyone's a Muslim, for example, and no one asks that question because no one thinks about it per se, or a lot of people don't.
Exactly, yeah.
But lately, this is a curiosity of mine, even in my personal life, not to the point of, and it has nothing to do with Muslims at this point, because I'm very familiar, and I'm familiarizing myself more and more because of this stream and other situations, why people believe in Islam. It's usually about other beliefs as well. It's happened that people that either I just met, or especially friends. It's easy to do with friends without them being offended or defensive about it. And my approach with people that I just made friends with, or even before on dates, believe it or not, like someone that I just met, I was able to work that conversation in. And when I say working in, it's not like, maliciously try to, work it into the conversation. It was more of an interest in this person that, I want to make a connection with. So even if we disagree about beliefs, I still want to know how it works in their mind. And it could be very important as a basis for a friendship or relationship and so on. And I am able to do that without it being offensive. And you'd be surprised how often I've been told, first of all, that this is very interesting and they're enjoying this, like even taking that look into their own mind and into mine. I've been surprised to hear that they're kind of impressed or happy about it because of the rarity of this kind of conversation and how they just never crossed their mind to have that talk before. And if they've ever seen it, it's more in a more hostile kind of situation about, it's kind of more of a debate situation or which one of us is right. So while I agree with you, I think there's a way to do it if it comes up organically. And I think it's important because it got me to reflect on my own thoughts, and it's a segue to other topics as well and how you think in general and adopt a belief, superstitious or not. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that. The third thing I completely forgot. But can you remind me what you said? Maybe I'll remember it again.
Well, I was just saying, kind of adds to what you were just saying, that I feel like those kinds of conversations about why we believe are important. Like they should be accepted as part of day-to-day life, and we shouldn't shy away from asking or bringing the subject up. Even if someone follows a different religion from you, or if you're religious and they happen to be atheist, I think we should be able to ask each other that, because if we want to make connections with each other beyond the superficial ones of, how the weather these days, or how about the Leafs this year? How about local sports team? They're doing pretty bad this year. This is a way to actually build a connection with someone and learn who they are in a deeper way. And if that's something we're looking to do, then that's a great way to do it.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I want to ask people in the comments to ask their questions while we wait for the next caller. And by the way, I'm going to be putting timestamps, I always do, to let people know if you're watching this offline, if a certain conversation is not exactly on topic or you want to skip to the next one, it'll be easier to do offline. And the commentary in between can be interesting as well. So try not to skip those. So yeah. So Potts is saying, it's also a good way to start a cult, possibly. I mean, you're not wrong, but also it's not like it's a gateway to cults. Not really.
It would be one of the steps in the guidebook of how to start a cult, maybe.
Or to have someone join your religion. Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I suppose it's kind of like drinking water is one of the steps to joining a cult. Like it's you still got to do it. Yeah, but that would be interesting. Speaking of cults, do you have any thoughts on cults at all?
Cults?
Yeah.
Well, there is that I can't credit this to myself, but there's that joke of what's the difference between a religion and a cult? In a religion, the cult leader is dead. In a cult, the religion, like the leader's still alive. So
I suppose, yeah.
I think there's truth in that joke. That I guess the way people use it colloquially is to say a cult is something that's minor, fringe, small, with extreme beliefs because they're not shared by the majority mainstream of people. But that's how all the major religions started and how they were perceived when they first started. And so the only real difference for me is, the cults just became massive religions and a lot of people believe them, so they became accepted. So with that being said, there are a lot of very harmful cults, even on the level of the harms of, organized religions, are even worse somehow. And I think the popularity of them, and there's one called Nexium that was pretty big amongst Hollywood celebrities. I'm not sure how it's spelled, NXVIUM or something. I think it shows that people have a thirst and a need for meaning in their lives, if you want to use the word spirituality. They want something beyond just the superficial materialism of day-to-day life. And that's why they're so prevalent and powerful even today, despite all the knowledge and all the debunking of a lot of the cult's practices that exist on the internet.
I agree with that. I have a couple of thoughts to share about that, but there's somebody in the comments who's a Buddhist who wants to join.
Oh.
So please,
That would be
the
interesting.
link, the link is in the live chat right now. So what was I going to say? I heard one other kind of snappy remark, which is kind of a joke, which is religion equal cult plus time, basically.
That's a pretty good one. Yeah.
And so here's my commentary on cults. When someone says cult, we always have this negative connotation, which is, crazy people in some kind of commune, all living together, doing the weirdest things or things that society would frown upon, and a lot of times actually harmful things, sometimes involving polyamory or something like that, especially with the cult
Heaven
leader.
forbid.
Yeah, heaven forbid that the cult leader marries more than one person, 11 or something. I don't remember the number. So my point here is, it's important to cults, and people get offended when a religion is classified, or religion in general could be classified as cults, because they think of that, far out image, and they think in real life religions aren't that far out, except the extremist versions or whatever, the fundamentalist versions are closer to resembling that, or that the people they know who are religious don't look like that, they don't act all the way like that. But I think the benefit of talking about what defines a cult, what characterizes a cult, like the BITE model, for example, BITE, it's a topic that I'm interested in exploring in a future video. And the benefit here is that it'll help you realize how closely, a lot of these ideas that you don't agree with resemble the ideas that you do agree with. And it's not necessarily going to make you abandon your ideas, but it again, it goes back to critical thought and having you take a look inside from an outsider's perspective, just
I
like
think
you're
that's
taking a
very
look at them.
important.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. I have a theory. Obviously, I can't confirm this, but I suspect that sometimes those distinctions of words come about to protect religion. So if there's something that's extreme or whatever, or something that looks really bad, religions will distance themselves and say, oh, well, that's a cult. It's almost like a propaganda technique of, well, this thing is not us, and just using that other word and then creating that really negative connotation surrounding it to show, well, we're not that.
Right. So I'll take some questions while we wait. People,
Okay.
again, if you want to join, I'm not sure why there aren't as many, specifically as many Muslims today. There usually are a bunch. I keep
They
trying
love you
to.
so much.
I mean, a lot of them are actually really nice, and there was somebody in the back, but they disappeared. And sometimes because they're afraid to, come up because they don't want to be found out by their surroundings. So maybe it's the way that I'm advertising these. Like, I'm trying my best to announce it as much as I can in advance, but unfortunately, the posts where I announce this kind of stream, they don't get as much attention as other posts.
For reasons we've discussed
Yeah.
offline. Yeah.
So I'll take a few questions. If you have questions, please go ahead and ask them, and I'll get to them when I can. So this is a question I found interesting. Oh no, where did it disappear? So the question was something about, do you ask like your Muslim friends in real life about their beliefs? And
That's a very good question.
yeah, do you want to go ahead and answer first?
Yeah, sure. And also, I forgot to say hi to Potts, who's the person who who commented earlier. He or she or they follow me on my channel, and I appreciate their support. So thank you for coming along here too. So that's a very good question, because I live in Toronto, and lots of Muslims here, big Muslim community, and Alim isn't my real name, but I'm instantly identifiable as most likely Muslim from my name. So I encounter Muslims all the time, and as a general practice, especially if I'm just meeting people in a low key social setting, I don't ask those questions, and I try to avoid going into the topic of religion. But not surprisingly, what often happens is people will just directly ask me, "Oh, you're Muslim, right? Oh, you're Muslim." And when I was younger, I would just pretend and fake it and say, "Oh yeah, I'm Muslim," and just to avoid potential conflict or that whole discussion that usually ends up being, "Oh, so what do you believe in? Nothing? We came from nothing." So I just say I'm Muslim. But lately, I've just been honest and said, "Yeah, I used to be Muslim, but I don't believe anymore. And if people want to take the conversation further, then I'll answer their questions." I haven't lost any friendships or connections because of that, but I'm sure it has shifted people's perceptions of me, because you can't do certain things of someone who is a Muslim that you can of a Muslim,
Yeah.
like going to the mosque or iftar for Ramadan or whatever.
Yeah. Well, let me give you my answer. So in terms of, I used to mask it, obviously, even when I had doubts, I would just say, yeah, I'm a Muslim. And interestingly enough, it got to a point in my past the doubts where I didn't even realize the label ex-Muslim. But when a non-Muslim would ask me, "Are you a Muslim?" Like they're very, very civil about it. They're actually extra careful not to offend me. And I'm like, it's okay. I'm not offended. I was never even offended to. I would tell people, ask me direct questions in the beginning when I was like very excited to tell people what I believe in Islam. I do believe in Islam, and the image of Islam is distorted in the West and all that stuff. Like I was trying to inform people about what I believe. And what was I going to say? Yeah, but and I had to mask at some point. But to non-Muslims, I got to a point where I would say it's complicated. I would say yes, but it's complicated because I wasn't sure anymore what my label is when there's a lot of, and I get that from a lot of questioning Muslims who call in and everywhere on the internet. I'm not sure because I believe some things and usually some things that are that I haven't really examined, or they don't necessarily, like, they're as Yasser Qadi would put it, supranatural or supralogical. They're not illogical. I mean, perhaps there could be a God who created everything. I can't say no, but it's everything else that was problematic. But I had to mask it with Muslims. Like I've had to go to the mosque a few times, and or I'd be at a gathering specifically for Ramadan. You can't just be like, "Hey, I'm just gonna chill here and not pray." So I've had to do that, and
That must be so awkward. Oh,
it
man.
is. Some people might even find it like it didn't really affect my psyche that much, but some people, depending on their level of, I don't know, existential dread, confusion, or experience, they might find that even distressing, right? To go back to that setting when they're trying to separate from it or put it aside and not think about it at the time being, or if they're past it and they don't want the reminder. I was fine with it, but at some point I was just, I wanted to be honest with myself more than anything. I didn't like that I was being a munafiq, I was being a pretender for the sake of, keeping the peace, so to speak. But it wasn't it's not my job to keep the peace when I'm not there to tell them you're all wrong. Why are you praying? It's just, I don't want to pray with you because this is just movement for me. But I used to go ahead and do it just to, keep the peace. But now I wouldn't pretend that way anymore. And also, given the past couple years or so have been this whole like pandemic stuff, I haven't had like the need to. I wasn't put in these situations anymore. And a lot of the people in my life who are Muslim are the kind who either know that I'm not practicing anymore, or they kind of don't care. And my curiosity, so my personal curiosity about why people believe, that is something that I satisfy with what I'm doing here, like specifically those streams as well. So I don't have that itch to scratch with people in real life if they're Muslim. I already understand that. And I don't want to put them in a position where they're going to dislike me because they realize I'm not religious, right? I just don't see as much value in it. But as you said, a lot of them, they start the conversation and they're the ones who are prying about it. And in that case, I wouldn't shy away from not really, it's not really about berating their belief or anything, but telling them what I believe, and they impose it as, why is that nonsensical to you? And then they take it personally when you explain why it's nonsensical, as if you're coming to their face and you're like, this is nonsensical.
Yeah.
So yeah, I try to avoid that situation, but I no longer lie about it. Yeah, that's
Well, that's
my
good to
take
hear.
on it.
That's good
Yeah.
to hear. Yeah, it's good to just be honest when you can safely. Obviously, just be honest about who you are. It's so freeing and liberating. And it was always so tough for me in Ramadan, because then all the Muslims around you will be asking, "Oh, are you coming to pray? Are you coming to
Yeah.
iftar?" And that's when the questions of, you're fasting, right?
Mhm.
And those are always the toughest times for me. And yeah, just the past couple years, just come what may, I'll just say, "Oh no, I'm not fasting. I don't believe in this stuff." And just to add a little thing to that, so there's Muslim acquaintances that I have, casual friends. Who knows? I really don't know if they would still want to be friends with me if they knew I was doing this stuff. So
Yeah.
there's a difference between, I think that's true for a lot of Muslims, that they're okay if you left Islam, but if they know that you're criticizing the religion, pointing out its flaws, then, as you said earlier, like, they take the criticism personally, as if you're attacking them,
Mhm.
which I think is one of the strengths of Islam. It becomes part of your identity, so it's hard to separate yourself from it.
Yeah. Actually, I want to describe an interesting situation. So years ago, in that in-betweener phase of mine,
Mhm.
at some point, like before I even knew about the label of ex-Muslim, and when I say the label of ex-Muslim, it's not just that the name is significant because there's a name. It's more about realizing people are past that point, right? They're and people ask, why would you call yourself that? It's important. Not that you always go around saying, as people say, hey, I'm Muslim. I don't go around saying, hey, I'm ex-Muslim. But when the label is relevant, like in these spaces, it helps people realize that, ironically, using the label in many cases means that you're past that belief completely. Because before that, it was just an ambiguous, oh, he's like a Muslim who doesn't practice, or he's one of those, who left Islam. But now those have a community, those have a representation. So before all that, I was like, I didn't even know what I thought of those because I didn't realize that they existed in numbers. I just thought of them as that kid who, strayed away and married a white girl, that kind of stereotype that we always heard about. And
Yeah.
so anyway, at a job that I had, I was living in a place where, like, being Muslim is not like, there are a lot of Muslims, but they're not the majority, right? And one of my coworkers is a convert who married a Muslim woman, and he's actually practicing. Like, he's a pretty chill dude, and he hangs out with people who, for example, like, drink beers and stuff. And he used to drink beers, and he has tattoos and things like that. So he's not really in your face about anything, except during Ramadan, I stopped fasting at that point, and he would ask me, "Oh, you're not fasting?" And it felt like he was joking. He wasn't really berating me for it, but he would bring it up more and bring up, those sinny things more with me than he would with a non-Muslim. Like, he doesn't go to a non-Muslim and say, drinking is bad, don't do that. But with me, he would say, you're not fasting. Oh, why? And he would jokingly say, oh, that's not good. Like, you should be fasting. And it made me feel that little bit of shame. Like, I don't want him to know that I'm not fasting. Now I don't feel that way, but I didn't like that at all. And it's funny that it could even be coming from a convert and it would shame me. In a way, it was a little worse. Yeah. So yeah, he's a chill dude, and I have no ill feelings. But I didn't like being put in that situation, and now that it's easy to get out of this situation for me because of the confidence that I have in who I am.
Well, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. There are some questions. The friendly Muslim wanted to join, and he keeps joining and disconnecting. I think he has a technical difficulty. Is there anything else you want to add before I get to the next question?
No, not really. It's just, I've been in that position that you have. I've shared this story before on my channel, where, funnily enough, when I was in the final stages of actually realizing, okay, I'm no longer Muslim, that I've left this religion. So this was when I was in university. I was around 18. One of my best friends converted to Islam. He'd already done that by the time I think he was gone for the summer, and then when he came back, we started the new school year. He had converted and had this whole religious experience, and so I had that experience too of a convert, like a recent convert, telling me, "Oh, you don't go to? Do you ever go to the masjid? You don't come to masjid with me."
Mhm.
Or, "Oh, bro, you're drinking again," or,
Yeah.
"Oh, bro, you shouldn't be drinking, or you should find yourself a good woman." So I wouldn't use the word shame for like to describe how I felt. It was more just awkward because I felt like I felt caught between these two positions of should I lie to maintain this friendship, or should I just be myself and risk offending him? I think at the time I didn't want to impact his conversion and just let him figure things out for himself out of respect to him. I'm not sure if I would do that today. I probably would have just been honest and said how I felt and what I thought and just
Mhm.
put it all out in the open and then come what may. But yeah, it's funny because so we're taught there's supposed to be no judgment in Islam, and we're not supposed to judge our brothers and
لا
sisters.
إكراه في الدين. There's
لا
no
إكراه في الدين.
yeah.
بالضبط, yeah. So what would happen is I would just see, obviously, in my day-to-day life when I was living in the Middle East, I'm not blaming Islam for this, but I'm just saying my observation of Muslim behavior was they wouldn't practice this. It would vary from direct in your face, you shouldn't be doing this, from my Islamic education teacher when I brought a deck of cards to school, heaven forbid, to, "Oh, let me check your tongue to see if you've been fasting today." So that's how it works.
Yeah.
That's how you're kept in the fold. There's the direct pressure, and then there's the low
You
level
know,
soft
I was just
pressure.
reading about like the tongue thing of I didn't have too much experience with that, but a lot of my friends were telling me that
Yeah.
in the middle while we were in the same place. But something that I read recently, which is more difficult, was girls talking about how they would have their periods inspected to see, because sometimes they would say, I can't
What?
pray. Yeah, by their mothers usually, or maybe even their teachers in some communities or religious teachers. They would say, like, you're not supposed to be praying as a woman, because not because God is so merciful, he knows you're possibly going through, PMSing and it's difficult.
Oh, because you're
It's
dirty.
it's filth. It's actually described as
You're
yeah,
filthy.
khubth, and yeah, it's not good. It just like how it's the same kind of word. I can't remember. I don't think it's khubth. It's something that means filth, and it's the same word that is used for like if you use the washroom or you fart and then you need to do wudu, which is it's another funny topic. But anyhow, they get this inspected to like their underwear or whatever to make sure that they're not lying to skip prayer or something like that.
I did
And
not know about this.
yeah, we
I mean,
wouldn't
I'm
know
not
because we're men.
surprised, but it's
Najis,
really
yeah, that's the
sad.
word. Najasa, yeah, that's the
Najis,
word.
yeah.
And it's such a filthy word. It's almost like it's insulting to say that someone is najis, a woman is najis, just because of a part of her body that God made, right? Like how can you hold both ideas at the same
Yeah.
time? And because women they have a time of the month where they can't pray. I'm not 100% certain whether they have to make it up. I think for like fasting, for example, they have to make it up afterwards. So inconveniently, as everyone else is not fasting, they have to fast to make up the days. But not only that, in justifications for calling women inferior and I'm sure some people will disagree, but in intellect and religion, it says naqisatu aqlin wa din. The logic behind calling them lacking in religion is because they don't do as much worship in terms of as much prayer as men, because they have to miss some. So what's the rationale here that God mandated this that way, and then he's like belittling them for it? It's bizarre.
Yeah, I have no comments to add to that.
Yeah.
It makes sense in the Islamic mindset, I suppose. And if you question it, well, Allahu A'lem, it's
God knows best.
God knows best.
Friendly Muslim is in the back. He is, again, your mic is not connected, so try to fix that. In the meantime, we still have questions. Let's see.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a very interesting question, and I like it. If any religion would be the true one, how do you think would you think it would show up? in other words, I think I can rephrase this as well. What would be convincing to you that a religion is the one true religion, or that this is God?
That is a really good question. Well, I don't know, because it would have to happen. I suppose it would have to be something that convinces both my emotional side and my rational side. And to just kind of specify something here a bit more, if this religion came from a God who wanted us to know that they're the true God, then that God should know how to convince each and every one of us in a way that's irrefutable that they're the truth.
Yeah, I think my answer is pretty much the same. In a sense, I don't know, because it is valid to not trust your senses to a degree. I mean, even mass hallucinations can be a thing, but it can be prolonged enough of a display of, I don't know, of supernatural power that it's impossible to deny that it's truly being experienced by everyone, right? To the same extent. Not really a personal experience where you see an angel or something like that, because hallucinations are very, very real, and insanity is real. And people having their minds altered by chemicals, be it in natural, like plants or mushrooms, or something synthetic, or poisoning, that's all very, very real. So, and then that brings us to the point of, okay, let's say I did see a very like a display of something bizarre, right? Supernatural. I cannot explain it. Science is or technology cannot replicate it at the moment. How did it happen? Is that proof that that is God? So
That's a very good point.
that would be proof to me that, okay, something has power or abilities that, like, I don't understand, and largely I suppose the scientific community doesn't understand, unless it's some kind of technology that is, it really exists. It's not supernatural, but just like how you would have shown a mobile phone to the prophets and he would have lost his mind, sometime around that time. This chat happening is mind blowing. Maybe there, once we start talking about this, we sound a little crazy because, well, maybe there are other dimensions, right? Or, but then is it crazier than the idea of this God that wants worship and intervenes in those ways? I don't know. So what I'm getting at here is, it's very difficult to say, but I know that an all-powerful God with these descriptions would know exactly the way to make that clear. And then that would be what's his, I'll add on part to that question. So say something did demonstrate to you that it is God, then would you obey? Like, let's say it's like in Islam, it wants worship, it demands worship, and it will punish you for not worshiping it, not loving it, that kind of thing. What will you do? What would you think?
Okay, you're asking me?
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah,
I thought you were asking it rhetorically.
No, I'm asking you.
Oh, well, I'll answer the question in a second. There's slight side tangent. Whenever Muslims tell me that the Quran has these scientific facts and prophecies that a human being couldn't conceivably have come up with in the 7th, 6th century AD, I just say, well, how do you know it came from God? Even if you did determine that it couldn't have been from a human, how do you know it wasn't an alien that's super powerful, or like more powerful than us and has knowledge we don't have, trying to trick us?
But then they tell you aliens, that's crazier than God. Yeah.
But the whole point is that you can't rule that out with your thought process. It's the fact that you can't rule out something as far-fetched as super powerful aliens trying to trick us shows there's a problem in how you're justifying your belief this way. But anyway, can you remind me of your question, actually?
Yeah. The only reason it sounds crazy, and I know this can be a soundbite, like I know it's very easy to take out this part of the conversation and Muslims will be like, look, they're more likely to believe in movie aliens than a God. And the reason why it sounds crazier is because it hasn't been around for long enough in their minds since their birth to be an established truth that doesn't need proving. But it's just as far-fetched, and once you realize that that's what it sounds like from the outside, that becomes problematic to your faith, possibly.
Yeah.
So my question was,
I
let's say,
remembered it. I remembered the
yeah,
question.
okay.
So
So to reiterate it for people,
yeah.
it's what
Please.
if God did demonstrate to you specifically and to everybody that it is God, but it then started demanding things like the Islamic God, like worship and respect and love. What would you think or do?
And so with this being said, would the threat of eternal punishment in hell also be hanging over my head?
Yeah, and like heaven and stuff.
So here's the interesting thing about this, and I'll just kind of explain what an apologist might say about this, because I've heard apologists talk about this. What they'll say is something along the lines of, well, God, Allah, whatever, is the wellspring of good and love and benevolence. So rejecting him, and he's also the reality. So rejecting him is rejecting your own essence, your own being. It's rejecting the the foundational notions of good and justice and beauty, blah blah blah. So in a way, it's inconceivable to do that. And the problem with that perception of it is, when you're being threatened and you're being I would say coerced through this eternal punishment aspect of it too, you're not really free to do it. And so I would accept, obviously I would have to accept that this God is real and that he created me, and I would worship him out of fear, out of out of not wanting to be tortured. And is that love? Could you really love a God that does that? And that's the weird thing. The God will know that you're worshiping him out of fear.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense in that kind of fundamental way.
That's pretty much what I'm thinking, is that the way that my mind works, I'm not able to respect that entity as it describes itself now. Like, just think about it. People would say, well, be grateful for your existence. You could have not existed. And, whether my existence is mostly suffering or mostly enjoyment is a different topic. But all that aside, if like to have that neediness for worship, that is something that I would need explained to me so I can respect it. Like I've given this example before. I have cats, and one of them has been bothering me for a while here for attention. I feed them, and let's presume that I had somebody breed those cats for me, like get 2 cats and have a litter because I want cats, not adoption or anything, though these are adopted. So I brought 2 cats to life in a sense, even though Muslims will say, well, God intended it and God brought them. You get the point.
Yeah.
Because of my decision, if I have free will, allegedly, now these 2 cats exist in the world. And so I decided to bring them to life. And because I have my selfish reasons of I want 2 cute furry companions and it's fun and things like that. And say they're not obedient, right? They keep messing up my stuff, cat problems. Does that mean that I am first of all, entitled to torture them? And secondly, does that mean that I'm entitled to their attention? Like I provide for them. If they're not giving me back what I'm putting into it, into this relationship, does that mean that I'm entitled to it? No, I am the one who decided to bring this lesser being into life, knowing that they have the free will not to like me, right? That they might want to do other things with their consciousness and their agency, I suppose. I could try to train them. But if it's really affecting them or distressing them, I shouldn't be doing that. Morally, it doesn't seem justifiable. And the other problem with that is, like, okay, let's say I really dislike it. Is it justified to not only get rid of them, but torture them for it? I don't think so. And people would say, well, they're dumb, right? Their intelligence they're not smart enough to completely understand you all the time. And that makes it different than us able to understand God's commands, right? Said clearly in a language, clearly is debatable, but in a language that we understand to some extent. I would say the gap in intelligence between me and a cat
I was
is
just going to say
much
that.
smaller. Yeah. Well, you go ahead and explain
No.
that.
Like it's that's the problem. Like when we're told that we can't possibly conceive of God's ways and that his ways transcend anything we could possibly understand, as for justifying why he would be willing to torture us, for example, for eternity, then it doesn't work. Like, I'm just imagining you walking around your place, just shouting, "I am your god" to your cats.
Yeah. By the way,
Actually,
the cat is not harmed, just to make this clear. Like, he loves being smothered.
he did look terrified for a moment there.
No, he always has that face. He's always like, what's going on? Existing is too much for this cat.
Yeah.
So yeah, and my point with that is, like, the gap between our intelligence and the cats is way
Exactly.
smaller than ours and God's. And my cats do understand what I want sometimes. Like, don't be on the counter. They will go on the counter, and as soon as they know that I'm there, they like sneakily leave. Like, they have some level of like intention of doing what I told them not to do. So that's what I think about that. I will worship God in that scenario out of self-preservation, because I don't want to be tortured forever. But would he count that as respect and subservience, as obedience, right? Like, does that matter to him that I'm
Yeah.
doing it for selfish reasons?
What
If-
matters most to him in that sense?
Why does it matter at all in a general question? But this attention that I'm giving him. But but he's the one who implemented the scare tactics, so I guess this is his fault that I'm using the scare tactics as my primary motivation. So in the end, it just doesn't add up, because this needy, powerful entity is a petty, unfair entity. That's my opinion on that. So I'm kind of destined to hell if he truly will care about my
We
love.
both are.
Yeah.
We both are. Yeah, we're already doomed.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And just to play the devil's advocate, what Muslims will say, well, God, as I mentioned earlier, Allah is the wellspring of good and justice. So whatever he decrees, or whatever he says, whatever wording you want to use, is the right thing just by default, by its nature. Like, the right thing is God's thing. So whatever we think is unfair or unjust can't be that, because it's against what God is saying.
Yeah. There are
Hard to argue that.
People will try, but the thing is, we don't need to continue arguing it, right? Because that's just like they don't need to justify their beliefs unless they start affecting others. This belief of ours doesn't really hurt them. Though I do see how, like, once I said this, right, I'm destined to hell, as it's kind of a joke, right? Because we're talking about this scenario that doesn't currently exist. I can see how a believer would think, that they're the trope of you're trying to take as many people to hell with you as you can. And
we're the tools of Satan.
Yeah. If we're tools of Satan, then God created a more powerful entity that is controlling us without us even consciously realizing it. Whose fault is that? Like, you created the super weapon, and then now you're upset that we're infected. Like, but it doesn't seem to me, based on how you talk about humanism and secularism, that you're trying to take people to hell, like to harm people.
Well, that's part of the deception, right?
Right. You're very good at it.
Yeah. There is, I don't know how predominant this belief is, but there is a belief, I think, amongst a lot of Muslims that we humans are doing God's plan, and the plan for us, you and me, are to be tricked and seduced into the wrong things. And that is part of the ultimate plan, that we are destined for hell because that's just the way it's all going to work out. And then the good people will go to paradise.
No free will.
Well, yes and no. Well, this could be a topic for another video. It's it's a yes and no thing. Like, it's part of God's plan, but we're free to do things that will end up being that plan.
Speaking of which, this is a very, hopefully soon, in a few days, upcoming video of mine. Muhammad Hijab, I'm pretty sure all of you have heard of him. He's a Dawah person, preacher of Islam, and he has a degree. I can't remember if it was a master's or PhD, something relating to philosophy from Oxford. And he had written an article that I read several months ago about free will and determinism in Islam. Or I don't remember if it was free will and something, and how he made it compatible, or how he sees them as compatible. And I went to read that article looking for an answer, not to be like, let's refute this article. It's more like, I wonder how he made sense, because that was a big question of mine, still is. Like, it was a big question of mine because I wanted to make sense of it, because I presumed both were true. Now I can see that it doesn't matter in my life, but it's an interest. Anyhow, I read it, and it claims to be a 55-minute read, but especially if you're not from a background of, having a PhD in philosophy, it takes longer than that. And that may make some people feel like they're not worthy of having this discussion or not worthy of pondering that article because it's clearly, beyond their qualifications. But I disagree. I started reading it and highlighting and rereading and taking the parts where he mentions other philosophies and looking into them on the side and then coming back to it. And I was disappointed because in the beginning he poses the question, and in the end and in the middle you see him saying, I believe this because I simply cannot believe otherwise, for example, which, okay, there you go. Do you really have free will to believe that? And also at the end of it, it says, it's just, as Muslims like to say, it was purely emotional, which is, I believe it because it's just, there's no other way. And somehow God would make it work. And a God that cannot make it work, I don't see as worthy of worship. And the point of all that is, like, I urge people to watch it when I release it. The point is, don't be intimidated by all of these qualifications, to realize that people, after all of this search, they fall back on the same point of contradiction, except they somehow choose faith, which if you're not able to do, that's not a problem of yours. If anything, I find to be more rational. So yeah, that's on the topic of free will.
Yeah. You remind me of something I'll just quickly mention.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you've heard of her, how well known she is. There's this historian who writes often about religion. Her name is Karen Armstrong.
I've heard of her, but I'm not familiar with the word.
She's written about Islam, Christianity, and just the history of religion in general. I highly recommend checking her out, even though she is, based on my understanding, a theist in a loose sense. Like, I don't think she follows any particular religion. She's one of those believers like Robert in our first call is. Anyway, I was curious to know how someone who understands the inner workings and how religions developed and grew could still believe that they're not man-made. And so I read an autobiography of hers called A Spiral Staircase, and I highly recommend it because I just wanted to see, how did she go from that place of, she was a nun. She was training to be a nun, and she left, and she essentially became an atheist, and then she went back to religion. I wanted to know what brought her back.
Mm-hmm.
And after reading this book, 200 pages, 250 pages, whatever it was, the conclusion was exactly what you described with Muhammad Hijab. It's just, well, I want to believe this to be the thing. It just made sense to me that it has to be true and it has to be this way. And that's a tough thing. I think in a way, the function of having all that elaborate discussion and philosophizing and the fancy words and terms, and you'll even see like equations in some philosophy dissertations or whatever papers. I think it's kind of to obfuscate the simplicity or the lack of an actual argument. So don't be intimidated by length or complexity.
Well, here's something you said. It's the intent, or it is to obfuscate. Are you saying they're doing it on purpose?
No.
Okay.
No. I think you're seeing the wheels and their brains spinning,
mm-hmm.
and that's what they're doing for themselves. They're just spinning the stuff in their heads to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I haven't read this paper by Muhammad Hijab, by the way, but when it comes to people trying to reconcile free will and determinism, it's usually the same kind of idea or argument that happens.
I'll say one thing and then I'll move to the questions because we still have some from the comments. Okay. Like my commentary on Muhammad Hijab's article, for example, and I'll clarify that in the video that I'm making. It's not to say that reading that article is a waste of time in general. I may have tweeted that months ago when I first took a look at it, but that was because I was emotionally charged about the implication behind the article and who this person is in general. Like I think he's an awful person. I don't understand how Jordan Peterson would platform him like that without realizing what he's preaching behind this, facade that he's putting on for Jordan. But taking all of that aside, the article is not a waste of time to, if you're trying to understand their process and trying to learn along the way. Yeah, like how the gears are turning in their head, like you said. It's obfuscating the final answer in a sense if all you care about is, okay, tell me how it works in as many pages as you need to, if that's necessary. But the process here is not about telling you how it, reconciling it. It's the end of it is, I went through this journey. There was no answer in all of these different philosophies, or these are the problems that I find with these different philosophies. And that part is useful. It's informative. What bothered me is that I don't remember if he poses it as an answer, like this article, or if people, once they see it, I saw a lot of tweets, like, no way those people read the article and digested it. They would say, MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair, and thank you. I'm so glad that someone so informed, is doing this. And they just see it as like a stopgap, which is just something to fill the gap, to say an intellectual has thought of it and they found an answer, therefore everyone else can. Yeah, that's my thought on that.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get to a few questions. Yeah, so to answer this briefly, what do Muslims usually say to explain free will and determinism? How do they explain it to other Muslims to make sense, or non-Muslims? A lot of different ways, which boil down to God is able to make it work.
Yeah, just to kind of repeat what I said earlier, the essence of the idea is God has a plan, and nothing can happen that's not part of this plan. But our free actions are interwoven within the plan. So it factors in our free choices, our free actions or inactions. So, because you have to perceive of God as being outside of time. So he sees it all, happening at once, or it has happened and is happening or whatever. So he's not in control of it in the sense of he's making you do things, except when he is.
Yeah, that takes away from part of the definition. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, his interventions are part of the thing that controls the overall plan, but your free will is still interwoven through it.
Wait, and at the same time, he simultaneously says that his intervention includes sealing your heart, for example, from faith, because you chose to disbelieve. Therefore, he's going to seal it so that you don't believe ever. Which sounds like a cope more than anything, It's like getting rejected and being like, okay, well, now you're not going to have me.
Yeah, the seal their hearts thing is, I think, early on in the Quran. I think there's a verse that literally says that.
Yeah.
And I always found that to completely contradict what I just earlier described. And that's the thing. As much as Muslims say that isn't the case, there's contradictions in a lot of those important things with Islam. But that's what Muslims will typically say, some variation of what I said.
And some have I'm going to talk about the article and I'll touch on some of these other philosophies, but as Hijab himself puts it, some of these philosophies take away from parts of like God's agency or God's, some of his descriptions. So anyhow, and to comment on this, I think you're being a bit harsh on Muhammad Hijab. He's just trying to convince himself. Yeah, the article, he does describe his honest journey of trying to convince himself, and I commend him for that. But whether he is posing himself as an intellectual who found the answer, or is presenting the answer, or it's just the view that people have of him, that's what I'm criticizing. And I'm harsh on him because he's an awful person.
Well, you could make the argument that, so I've never spoken to him. I've seen his debates and videos and stuff. He seems to me like one of those people who really tries to project this aura of being strong and tough and
using big words as well.
Big words. And there could be a case where he's doing all the stuff of being this intellectual, speaking out and open and doing all this stuff because it comes from a place where he's trying to convince himself. If you know what I mean, it might come from that.
Yeah.
So I see what the commenter is saying. Like, we shouldn't be too harsh on someone when they're just trying to figure things out, even if they are telling other people the stuff. But I have seen Muhammad Hijab be intellectually dishonest in debates, particularly the ones he did with, what's his name? Cosmic Skeptic, which is a great channel. I totally recommend.
Absolutely.
So that's where I draw the line. When you're intentionally misleading or omitting to make your arguments work, even if you're just doing that to, justify your own beliefs for yourself, it's not cool.
Yeah. He in general, he's not a good character. And directly attacks people in certain ways, even not ex-Muslims in that case, with Cosmic Skeptic. So that's why, whether his intentions with that article were good or not, I think in general he deserves the skepticism and harsh criticism.
Well, we should always be skeptical.
Yeah.
No matter who it is.
Always. Okay, super chat, and then I'm getting to other chats. Thank you, Mr. Monster. They say, don't know if you already covered this topic, but did you see the conversation between Apostate Prophet and Ali Dawah yesterday? Keep up the good work. Thank you.
I have not personally.
I've seen like
I can't keep up. I can't keep up with all
No.
these live streams and debates and stuff.
I'm gonna be honest, like, yeah, aside from the fact that I spend so much time like doing this, right? It takes away, like, if I keep up, then it's taken away from my personal time. And in that case, I don't even know if it's like worth the watch, because, and this is not a dig at AP per se, it's purely a dig at Ali Dawah, because even Muslims have been talking about how that was a waste of 3 hours. And his character as a person, like, for example, Infidel Noodle, he made 16 TikToks calling her like chicken noodle and some weird like childish stuff, and not even engaging with anything she's ever said about Islam and women or so on. So his character is just like lowest of the low. He's the one, you know, famous for the soundbite, and we're proud of that, executing apostates. So yeah, not worth the time, I would say. He demonstrated his idiocy, I'd say that.
Well, you could probably, I mean, these debates, Muslims always tend to say the same things anyway. I bet you could play, you know, that drinking game where 10 things that are going to happen in this next Marvel movie. You could probably guess the 10 things that Ali Dawah was going to say.
You'll get alcohol poisoning if you play that game with Ali Dawah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and this is a comment about Muhammad Hijab. Anyhow, the next comment I'm going to take, I'm trying to take them in the order that they came, that's all.
Okay.
What's a popular point of Islam that is difficult to disprove in your opinion, and why? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, you could just say the existence of Allah in the first place. How are you going to disprove that?
How do you disprove the never proven or unprovable?
Well, that's the problem. It's an what's it called? It's like an unfalsifiable claim in many senses.
Yeah, I mean, I somewhat disagree. How do you disprove Allah specifically? Depends on what descriptors of him you take to be true.
Sure.
The existence of a God. I mean, even this God. No, here's how it can be disproven, which is not an approach I take, because what hasn't been proven doesn't need disproving. You can point out that God is never going to lie, right? Unless like God is the best deceiver, it says. So unless you take that to mean that God can lie sometimes or omit the truth for something, then it all makes sense. But if you take God to be honest and, you know, not gonna lie, then he is contradicting himself in other ways, and that would disprove the honest character, meaning this whole description together is false. Yeah.
Oh, there's ways out of that, though. That's the problem with Islam, is they'll say, well, what we're perceiving as his dishonesty is actually part of his plan that emanates from his goodness. So there's really that's the whole problem. You end up at these dead ends, these brick walls.
Or something you can't disprove is all this metaphysical stuff that we hear being, you know, scapegoated as metaphysical, like God sending the shooting stars as missiles, which they're not shooting stars, right? They're meteors or comets or, you know, masses that are catching on fire. God sending them as missiles to hit the jinn. We can't see any of that. So metaphysically, yeah, you can't disprove that, but it's also such a ridiculous claim. There's a lot. Yeah. All right. Bearded Mystic Podcast. Hey, thanks for being here. How much of the Eastern religions do you know, like Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, etc.?
So me personally, I know close to nothing about Hinduism and Sikhism. That's something I'm hoping to change and like do research about them. Buddhism, I know the essential basics of it, and I do like some aspects of Buddhism. So beyond the basics, I don't really know much either, which is why I was interested when you mentioned that a Buddhist was on the chat. I would love to speak to a Buddhist more about that.
Yeah, they said they'll come back if they get home and we're still here. So we'll see. Yeah, same here. I don't know much about any of that. I am very interested in Buddhism. I've heard a lot about it, but haven't had the time or energy, to be honest. So I prioritize investigating the things that I want to talk about or that interest me at the moment. But once I have time, it's on my list. Yeah. Next question. Robert. Hey, Robert. in your careers as visible ex-Muslims, have you ever encountered or been confronted by Dawah women, and where are they as vocal as the men?
In person or just
I think they mean online, like in
online?
general. Yeah.
Oh, you can go first on this one.
So like little, I suppose like guerrilla factions of Dawah people. Like, I don't know how big of a person, how big of a following they need to have, or what qualifications to be a Dawah person. Some who aren't qualified at all have a big following, and I guess they're still doing Dawah. But yeah, I've come across women like who are self-proclaimed like preaching Islam to some extent or advertising things about it, who are especially vicious about defending things that it could go either way. Either Islam is actually good to women and everything you're citing is wrong, is what they say. And when obviously they just haven't experienced it, then they're just taking the wrong, like the interpretations that are very fringe. Or it's the opposite, which is, yeah, my husband has the right to discipline me, and yeah, Allah knows best. And I've been attacked viciously by both. And I was surprised because I thought most of them are men, but you do get the occasional woman, which is, representation.
Yeah, have you ever noticed how I always thought it was interesting how their approach is different from the men, because while the men are more, I would say, assertive and just saying, well, this is so, this is not so, the women kind of do it in the sense of, oh, well, look at me, look at my lifestyle, like I'm okay.
I'm proof of, that you're wrong.
They're coming at it from a different direction.
I've seen that. Yeah, for the most part, because men are not talking from experience per se. They might point to examples here and there, which is weird. Like, if you're Arab, you might have heard of Abdullah Rushdie. He's an Egyptian Dawah person who's kind of controversial even among Muslims now, even though what he's saying is purely actually Islamic opinion. And he tweeted once about how a hijabi woman was playing volleyball. Like, there's a famous photo of a hijabi woman on one side of the net and a white girl on the other side, and they were dressed very differently. Yeah. And he was commenting on how, like, look, you could still do everything with the hijab. The weird thing is, like, they're doing that because of what secularism allows, and he would be against it in any other setting. He would say, look, like, her body's still showing, look, your woman is not supposed to be doing this. But they're just utilizing whatever works to get their message across and defending Islam. So yeah, I've seen those approaches. Yeah.
How could it not be a disadvantage to wear one while you're playing most sports?
Well, then people would say, and this part is kind of valid, that men will objectify women. Like, men could be creeps about it. Like, they check out the women who are playing volleyball who are dressed. But then again, men harass hijabi women in the Middle East more than other countries.
Well, that's like this would be a whole other topic, but I always find that the idea of making or encouraging, whatever word you want to use, having Muslim women covering themselves up is actually objectifying and sexualizing them further by saying that because they are such a sexualized thing, they literally have to be concealed.
They're embracing that and emphasizing it to some extent, and victim blaming. But yeah, that could be its own topic. Yeah. Thanks, really shady, for the super chat. When Muslims argued that all sophisticated things need a creator, why do they miss the point that in this case Allah would need a creator by that logic? I mean, I'm not well versed on this infinite regress argument, but I think it's basically, I mean,
that's it. No, that's exactly what they'll say. They'll say you can't possibly, by the rules of logic, you can't possibly just keep going back and forth, like back in time of who created what, this created this created this. So there has to, logically speaking, be some limit, and that limit, that first thing, is the creator, Allah. So that's how they'll explain it.
And I mean, I could see the sense in if you presume that to be a rule, which I don't understand how this could be a given rule.
No, do you see how they sneak in creator?
Yeah.
Because how we determine that there has to be a creator, and then they'll go, well, there has to be a creator because blah, blah, blah. And so the obfuscation begins there.
Yeah. And not only that, this argument is meant to support my God. But
my specific one.
Yeah. It could just be something, let's say that is true. It could just be a thing, or it's hard to describe what that thing could be, but how is it yours who wants this and that and wants worship and torture? And they never make that leap. And that's why I don't bother arguing things about, like the atheistic point, whether you're positively asserting that there is no God or that we just don't know and this concept is man-made. I'm more on that this concept is man-made, and I don't need to argue whether this concept is plausible or not, because we haven't gotten from that point to, and therefore it wants this religion. That's my thought about that. And I think it's kind of a non-answer. It's like, well, there has to be something, therefore it's, we can't keep going back, therefore it's my thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But essentially, to answer your question, Muslims have found some way to justify
not just Muslims.
that.
True.
A
lot of
believers
monotheistic and other, hey, Skeptic. The Skeptic, I love his channel. You should go follow him. We're gonna
I like
tick. Yeah. We're gonna be collaborating on something at some point soon. He is an atheist from a different background than ours, so I might do something like this with him he would offer a new perspective, right? Like an outsider's perspective. So might be worth a watch for you guys. Secular Spirit, a question for you. What is your view on Muslim reformers, both West and in the Islamic world?
That's a very good question. Thank you so much for asking, Veers Voss. So my personal view is that while it seems like on the surface a good thing, like even in a practical sense, that, well, these Muslim reformers, they recognize that there's problematic aspects of the faith or how it's interpreted anyway. And by reforming it, they'll actually be reducing the harm that Islam causes by having people stop practicing a lot of the harmful aspects. And it's the similar kind of thing that you'll see with Christianity and how it's become much more moderate than it used to be 1,000 years ago. Like you'll see united churches where they'll accept LGBTQ people and all that. My problem with that is that the moderates justify the, if you want to call them, more extreme parts of Islam. So the parts that talk about how, as we talked about earlier, that if you don't obey, worship God, you're going to go to an eternal punishment in hell. So even a moderate is going to believe that, unless we get to the point where there's a moderate who doesn't even believe that anymore, and they do exist. So my concern is that they're actually enabling the more harmful parts of Islam. And what I would say to those moderates is, instead of trying to find some way to make Islam work with what you know is the right thing to do, and you know that's the case, that's why you're trying to reform it, what if you just take the good things from it and discard everything else, and discard the things that you don't know for sure? So I would say they're kind of wasting their time. I think they should just take the next step. But if I was to step outside of myself, I think it is a good step in terms of our development as a species, as a human civilization, that we're starting to depart more from the traditional, whatever, literalist, like the Islam of the past.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. What I want to add is, not only are they enabling, like, some of these concepts, you don't even realize how harmful they are. Wait, are you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Some of these concepts, they seem benign, like things like heaven and hell, like, teaching children about hell, but you don't realize that how that could evolve in the person's mind.
You. Yes.
Even if they're not super religious, you don't realize how that could push them in a certain direction, or just internal struggle, because you're teaching them a concept that's not only unproven, and there's no point in my opinion, it's not really helpful as a net positive. It's not a net positive. And that's one aspect to it. There are things that are just, aside from the obvious, misogyny and things like that, they could propagate some of these like more insidious opinions that they might not think of personally, because they don't examine their beliefs that often every day. But somebody who's more skeptical, who will keep their faith, is going to be struggling so hard. And someone who's gullible can be pushed in a different direction. But someone is asking if we're aware of the views of Mustafa Haikal. I have his book. I will read it at some point, but not yet.
I haven't heard of him, to be honest. No.
Yeah, I came across him on Twitter. I still have a couple of thoughts on that. So there's also progressive Muslims. They kind of give PR to Islam. And Yasser Qadi has used this phrase specifically, PR, which is crazy. I made a video about that in his, like, I don't remember what it was called. I'll put a link up there, but it's about blasphemy killings. Anyhow, the problem with that is, like, someone who isn't familiar with Islam, they would see their neighbor as a progressive, right? Or their friend is a progressive. They see a lecture by some progressive preacher saying, oh no, like none of this bad stuff. And they would just cement this idea: Islam is not a problem in any way, in any form. And anything that we see that is problematic is a fringe extreme case, when the numbers are overwhelmingly on the conservative side, is what they would consider it to be, the conservative side. And a bigger problem than that is how a lot of progressives would side with any Muslim of any label against someone who is a critic, right? As long as they're on the right side in their mind. They might be vicious about it. They might not be vicious about it, but rarely do they stick their neck out for actually like upholding our rights, for example, as apostates. So it's hard to, sometimes I feel like, okay, they could be allies in a sense. Like, they don't have to disbelieve in Islam. They don't have to actively help my channel or anything, but to be able to sometimes speak out in those situations where bad Muslims are saying something and say, I don't think you're correct because of this and that, or no, they shouldn't be executed. Often it doesn't happen. They take a passive approach to it. So they're just increasing the numbers of Muslims on paper, increasing the support for all types of Islam. And lastly, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be doing reform. I'm saying why I see it's problematic. And the last point is why I see as it's difficult, if not hopeless in many cases, because they need a solid basis for it to ever take off. So, and like Christianity, for example, I don't think Christianity has like a solid basis in the sense that Islam, its whole brand is, it's unchanged. It's a final, incorruptible one. God's words is for all times. And whenever someone tries to stray away, it's called bid'ah. It's innovation. And they're specifically warned about trying to change that. And the people who cling on hard, like fundamentalists or Salafis, or I see the logic behind of what they're saying. Like, if I was a believer, I don't know where I'd be inclined, because once you start putting in more and more personal interpretation that strays away from the original, you're doing exactly what you're warned not to do. So it's hard for those interpretations to take off without actual basis, unless they start dismissing a bunch of things and committing what other people would find to be kufr. So yeah, that's what I think about it. It's difficult, and if I believed, I would be stuck between either being a progressive sort of preacher. Like, I can imagine myself being Aladdin, ironically with the same name, because it's praising religion, Aladdin. I could see myself being this character as a progressive Muslim today if I still somehow was able to believe that all of this mess is from God. Like, that's what I'm saying. I want to minimize the harm in either way. I want people to support the good belief, but I can't do it myself, and I can't even promote it because of the downsides, and I can't wholeheartedly believe that it'll work. So that's why I don't vocally support it per se, but I let them do their thing till it starts stepping on our toes as, critics or apostates, and starts harming other people. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that. There's more comments. It's funny how this stream has turned into something else. I'll probably cut some portion of it and make it like its own video. Yeah, I'm still waiting for callers, but it might just not happen today. Let's see, more questions. I can't really answer this one, so I'll, for safety reasons, but if you want to answer it, at what age did you drop the Muslim label from questioning to ex-Muslim, and how many years would you say it took?
So I would say I started questioning Islam when I was 17, around 17, and I dropped the label a year later. So it took me a year.
And then did you adopt the label ex-Muslim?
The ex-Muslim thing, no. I called myself an atheist, but I started calling myself ex-Muslim years later when I just happened to come across the Ex-Muslims of North America organization. They have a chapter in Toronto, and I just saw that there's these people calling themselves ex-Muslim, and even then, I didn't really use it to describe myself to anyone. It's just something I started using when I began doing my social media stuff. So I don't go around saying, "Oh, I'm ex-Muslim."
And in my case, it took years. Like, I don't want to be specific about the ages, but I had questions when I was younger, but I kept the label of Muslim and didn't really question the validity of the whole religion. But it took years for me to accept that that I'm really, really struggling to make something work when I can't even believe in it. That I'm just afraid of the transition, and that for good reason. You know, it was so deep psychologically, that fear of letting go, that I've said this before. I would have dreams about it sometimes, and even since I was young, this questioning made me have subconscious dreams. And at that point, I was swayed to believe that it may be a sign from God, right? Because in Islam, if you get dreams, that does have significance, and especially if you meet a prophet or something, some are told that this actually means that the actual prophet met you. And I asked, well, what if the prophet told me to do something bad? They would say, then that's the shaitan pretending to be the prophet. So I saw, like, I didn't see God in a physical manifestation in a dream, but when I was 17, I did have a dream about, or younger than 17, about me being in some kind of camp on the Day of Judgment with like a few other people, and being told, look, this could have been your time, but I'm giving you a second chance. And that, like, really in my head, it was like, damn, dude, like, how you need to quickly get out of this question and go back to being a good Muslim. Though I wasn't sure if it was actually significantly supernatural or it's just subconscious, but at the time, I mean. But what I wanted to say about that, not that long ago, like during my, getting out of Islam for the last time phase, or, definitively phase, I was taking a certain medication for an acute problem, and one of the side effects is more vivid dreams. And that's when I started to have more of these like dreams about the topic more often. And that cemented the idea in my mind. It validated that this is all in here. It's not that God is beaming me dreams. This is my mind doing this subconscious processing of these fears and these thoughts. So that validated a lot this whole idea that I don't know what the spirit or consciousness is, but it's very biological, very obviously. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that. And we still have more comments. If you want to go at any point, please let me know, Spirit. But
Oh, I'm good.
Okay. And I try to keep it under 3 hours, so maybe we won't go that far. We'll see.
Okay.
Really shady. Thank you again for the super chat. Says, agree. Zakir Naik, Shabir Ali, etc. Can't possibly believe Islam is true after so much research or debate, but preach for gains, money, audience, and fame. What do you think?
It's hard to say. Like, none of us can really put ourselves in someone's minds. I mean, I always wonder sometimes about the self-help gurus, or even someone like Deepak Chopra. Do they actually believe what they're saying, or they? I think it's more clear with people like the televangelists when they're like calling for donations and flying around in
the jet guy,
in multiple jets. Yeah. I don't think that guy's the only one. So what it is I think that they just become really good at knowing what to say, not even necessarily to others, but to themselves, and they become blinded by their bias. I always think about do you know who Francis Collins is? I think that's his name. He's someone who's an advisor to the U.S. government, a scientist, and he had this religious experience where he was I don't know if he was reborn Christian, or if he discovered it and was something else before. And it's just so interesting to know how, sure, these things come with the money, the fame, the renown. But I think for a lot of them, it does really come from this personal place where they want to bring to others the things that they have gained, but they're so lost in their own desire for that for themselves that they don't see it from an objective lens anymore. They don't
for
look at it
others as
logically.
well. Like once they
Yeah,
get to that point, they want to save the rest, right? In whatever the same mechanism that they used for themselves.
exactly.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Like Yasser Qadi, some cases are more suspicious than others, but I can't determine anything, and I find it bizarre. Like Yasser Qadi's talk about, you know, the big holes in the narrative that he was talking about, and a crisis of faith that he had before. I don't know how he resolved it, because I don't think he gives an outline, and I don't think there is an outline for a process that will work for everybody. But I don't know if he has gone into details. I don't think so, but I would like to know, and that was always a curiosity of mine, especially someone who like completely became an atheist or whatever, or lost their faith. How did you get back? Like, what's the process to get belief, regain it, or get it in the first place? I don't know if any of those people scream, you know, scammer to me. So I can't
Well,
say that.
does Shabir Ali look like someone who's really rolling in the dough
In
to
the
you?
dough. No, I think that guy has good intentions, for example.
I think
I
so too,
yeah, I
as
think he's
classical
very
scholars would say. Yeah.
as classical scholars. Doesn't mean that I admire his personality, for example, or I'm sure he's such a sweet guy, you know, aside from these topics, and he is a sweet guy even explaining the topics. But the harm that he causes through this like pseudo progressiveness that doesn't actually answer anything, it pushes people into either side. Either they're left more confused, or they realize that progressives are, you know, full of it in their words, and they go to a more, you know, traditional interpretation, which is worse.
I suppose so.
Yeah. Anyhow, yeah. A couple of more questions. Well, a bunch more actually. Trey No says, "Come on, man! Please spend more time in videos explaining the mistakes in the Quran and why Islam is false and debunking it, please and thanks." I'll give my thoughts first, and then I'll let you go. You know, have a go at this. For multiple reasons, I don't do this. I will talk about, for example, the absurdity of a story, like the story of Prophet Ibrahim, the hilariousness of, you know, I'll make jokes about it to normalize this idea that it was never proven. So you get to joke about it and treat it as, you know, false to begin with, because what was never proven doesn't need to be disproven. And that's at the core of my answer here. And more than enough people, I think, well, not more than enough, there can never be enough. A lot of people are already doing this, you know, going into deep dives about why this is scientifically false, and, you know, debunking the miracles and all that kind of stuff. It takes so much energy, and it causes so much fighting over something that is completely obvious once you examine the big picture. And I think it's more important to so the goal isn't to get people out of Islam by saying, look, the Quran has mistakes, therefore you have to disbelieve now. I don't care about that. But getting them to examine their beliefs is a bigger like part of that, higher up on the hierarchy. And whether it causes them to leave or to reform their beliefs is a win in my books. It's not about what they believe at the end of the day in terms of the supernatural and God. So I don't like that approach for myself, and I don't have the energy. It just begets more of that deep dive into silly things. So it's not my domain, and I don't think it'll ever be. What do you think?
I think there is value in doing those things,
Mhm.
like actually taking the time to explain mistakes, errors, contradictions, or just going piece by piece of showing how these supposed proofs, aren't actually what they aren't actually good proofs. But to each their own. So for some people who are maybe more logical and more reason based, that will actually work. That will get them to open their minds and see, oh, maybe
Mhm.
these aren't good things to use to base my belief on. Then there are the ones who are more emotionally attached to the reasons why they believe, and that's not going to do anything for them, even if they say that those are the reasons why they believe.
They'll switch to
So,
another miracle or another, yeah.
yeah. So I think what you're doing is very good, Aladdin, where I think just sharing our experiences and sharing our perspectives, and then maybe kind of mentioning those things along the way of why this thing in the Quran doesn't work for us, also is beneficial, because then people will see where we're coming from. They'll see that we don't have any nefarious intentions beyond wanting to send them all to hell as tools of Satan. And just having a voice, having a presence, I think that's the most important thing. And it doesn't really matter the way we do it or what the specifics of the content is. It's just the more there is of it, the more people there are doing things like this, like what we're doing right now, the more it will help people see there's an alternative outside of Islam. There's a way you can continue, having a meaningful life outside of it, and just showing people that it's okay to be an ex-Muslim.
And that you can be a whole person out, that once you get to hear, I've gotten this a lot, especially on streams when I used to do on TikTok, where I would delve into more like casual chats as well. When they realize that, okay, I'm not this evil demon who, they thought I was, when they hear that I still we like the same things, not necessarily sports, for example. I was going to give that as an example, but I don't really follow sports, but other stuff, they realize, okay, there's a person there. I think that's important. Yeah, thank you for the compliment, Secular Spirit, and I do see value in that approach. I'm not saying there isn't value, but I only have so much energy, and I've done this for myself, right, as one of those steps in getting out of Islam, as to actually prove Islam. And I have the research. Part of it is categorized because I'm kind of meticulous about some things. Part of it is not. It's just I don't have the time to delve into all approaches.
And those kinds of videos take a lot of time to put together.
Yeah, because I want to be extremely methodical, and I would rather read into, now I have an interest in philosophy. I would rather read into that than read into silly debates about the embryology, for example, when it's already been spoken about 1,000 times, very blatantly. And then some Muslims have actually moved on. They said, okay, that's not really a miracle, but let's move on. So that's my thoughts on that. Let's see the next comment. Osiris is saying there's atheists online protest February 22nd. Can you tell me more about that in the chat? I'm not really familiar with that, but yeah. Next thing.
Arab atheist. What an oxymoron.
There's a lot of them, a lot more than people realize. And people keep asking me, why don't you make videos in Arabic? So I've got
That's a good question.
Yeah. I've got my safety concerns, and I don't want to delve into that. But aside from that, I think there are people speaking up. There can always be more, and we need more. There's a lot more preachers of Islam than there are ex-Muslims talking about everything in general, not just criticizing Islam, but just representing. So there can always be more. But I think this niche here of being, I don't mean to give myself legitimacy because I am born Arab Muslim in a Muslim community, in a Muslim country. But to some people, that seems to put their mind at ease a little bit, because I'm not interpreting things out of my own mind, but I'm inspecting the primary sources closer to the person who doesn't speak the language and has to trust that intermediate person. So I think there's a vacuum here in the English speaking world that needs to be filled. And that's part of why I focus on here more than there, because you can't do everything at once again. So that's my take on that. What about you? Why aren't you doing content in Arabic?
So one of the reasons, so when I first started doing this stuff, I did think about that myself. And obviously, I think it's clear to see that there's probably less Arab speaking people doing what we're doing, or maybe I just don't know of them as much. But
there might actually be more, compared to just purely English speakers. I mean, I know there's
you could be right.
Scene.
Yeah. But I remember when I was just looking in, I couldn't see many Arabic speaking ones, but I figured that I would have a much wider reach by speaking to English, because obviously not everyone who's Muslim or ex-Muslim speaks Arabic, and a lot of Arabs speak English, obviously not all of them. And I just felt it was a more universal language. And I wanted to also maybe address more the Muslim communities that are in the West than the ones in the Middle East, because I think they're the ones that are more receptive to change, and that change could impact change within the Middle East or within the Muslim world.
I agree with that. And I think there's too much one-sided conversation about Islam in the English-speaking world, in Dawah, in forms of a lot of Dawah, be it strict interpretation as Islam actually is, as the primary sources say, or on the other hand, more apologetic ones or the more obfuscated interpretations. Whatever it may be, there's not enough of us being represented here. So that's kind of my motivation there. Summertime says, thank you for the super chat. They say Al-Bukhari, this 6529, claims 99% of humanity will go to hell. Allah will supposedly torture all humans forever. Any thoughts about this madness? So I would need to take a look at the hadith before I make any.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that hadith.
Yeah. I'm familiar with the hadith vaguely. Like I've heard about this before. So I won't comment on whether it's sahih or not, but this concept I've heard a lot before. And I did have that question even without that hadith. Most of humanity is going to hell, especially given how now they have more of an opportunity to hear about Islam or like get it, get the true message and all that stuff. It's a big problem in my mind, even especially when you think about among Muslims, not every Muslim is going to heaven. There's the counter argument that they're not staying there forever, even though
I was just going to say that.
Yeah. Like they pay their debt of sins and then they go to heaven, but the disbelievers, khalidina fiha abada, like forever. The majority of humanity is going to hell. Funny enough, in my next week, I'm talking about Jonathan A.C. Brown. He has a bunch of videos on women. And one of them is about a hadith about how the majority of women are in hell, and how he defends that. It's interesting to me. So yeah, don't forget to watch that, people who are here. Do you have any more thoughts about that?
So I just kind of quickly looked up the hadith on sunnah.com. So I'm not sure if I can share that, but essentially it does essentially say what Summertime said. And just in addition to that, so he was talking to Adam, and Adam said, well, if 99 out of every 100 of us are taken away, what will remain of us? And Allah said, my followers in comparison to the other nations are like a white hair on a black ox.
That doesn't answer the question.
It's like, it just is what it is.
Yeah. And I think there might be implications about the color of, like, there's always this whiteness and blackness superstition in Islam. So, you're more special, I guess. Doesn't really answer.
I think that's the intention. So if you were to look at this like a pyramid scheme or a cult, I think the Jehovah's Witnesses have a similar concept where only 6,000 people will enter the kingdom. It's a way of incentivizing you to become a believer, because like I want to be one of the 100, like the one in the 100, and
the 1%.
And when you are a believer, you feel special. Like you feel like, wow, I'm tapped into this truth that most of the poor, sad, lost people just.
That came with survivor guilt for me. I don't understand how that doesn't just like.
Especially when your loved one, a lot of your loved ones aren't going to be in that 99%. But here's where Allah is the wellspring of goodness and love comes in, because this is the way and it will be for our own good. And there are some Muslims who will even probably argue, and these are the more progressive ones, well, he doesn't actually mean that. He loves us all.
Exaggeration, yeah.
He's just saying that because that's what people at the time needed to hear, and that's what worked best. But even though Islam's for all times and all places, there are some things that we can understand were meant for people back then and not for us, like slavery. So there's... I only play the devil's advocate to just kind of show how not only
it's important.
It's important because I'm trying to explain that I've taken the time to actually understand how the opposite side thinks, and to show like these are things I used to believe. But it's also important because we're not saying Muslims are idiots or that they haven't thought of these things or whatever. It's just we're trying to show what's underneath, the problems underneath those beliefs, and
the rationalizations,
and how the rationalizations need to be thought out a little bit better.
More comments. Just a commentary on why content in English. Really Shady says, like Aladdin says earlier, time is limited. Spend that time doing what's more high yield English. Needless to say, English has a far wider reach. I'm not sure about that point. I mean, in a sense, yes, because it's a new kind of untapped market, but that's not how I thought of it, because if anything, if you're good at what you do as an Arab ex-Muslim, you will gain more fame because of the controversy, right? People like the audience, English-speaking audience, the majority of English-speaking people don't care about this content because it's not close enough to them to care, or because it's easy to dismiss. But when that's why a lot of the Arab ex-Muslims, they have a huge following, because there's not that many of them, and it's such a controversial topic that the controversy begets fame. And so yeah, that wasn't my rationale behind it, and to be honest. Yeah, so I just wanted to comment on that. And this person's serendipity is saying review a reformer like I Cole, rather than the usual guys. I've been reviewing or talking about progressives. I mean, they're kind of reformists, but it gets to the point where I realize they're basing it on nothing. They're just saying we should look into newer contexts. They don't even say how, or like they don't get to any point. So maybe at some point, but it's lower priority because I don't really want to oppose them in that sense. Yeah, so maybe at some point. No Zone 75 says, thank you for the super chat. They say, I find it difficult sometimes to be an ex-Muslim and a proud Arab. What's your take on this? You go.
Oh man, do you remember there was this one time I suggested to you that it could be interesting to do a live chat where we just discuss how we kind of reconcile our Arab identities with being ex-Muslim, or is there even a space for that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a tough one because Islam, more so than in the West, I think that's obvious to say, Islam is so tied into your culture, into what everyone is doing, into your identity, into the fabric of social life, that into the music, maybe not the music so much, but like into like architecture.
Even the music, yeah.
I suppose so, yeah. I was just thinking about the Muslims who think, the Salafis, I guess, who think music is not okay. But life revolves around Islam in such an integral way. And when you take that away, like, it's hard to see what's left.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the Arab identity without Islam? And so beyond that, I can't speak for you, Aladdin, but I find it hard to be a proud Arab too, because beyond just our history of being colonized and oppressed and all that, and how today, like, a lot of our countries are just mired in corruption and dictatorships, which you could say a lot of that is due to our legacy of imperialism and being colonized. It's just hard for me, periods, to be proud, let alone because I'm not Muslim anymore. But I have a little bit more to say, but I'll let you share your piece too.
Well, part of it is, as Frank says, Islam is an identity for
sure.
Many people.
Yeah.
It overrides the national identity, or if you're talking about countries, or even the Arab identity.
Well, yeah, the Ummah comes first.
The Ummah, exactly. There's a lot of these movements, back in historically, and some of them are politically, nationally inspired. Like, there's a lot more to it. But this idea that unity is an idea that it's easy to get behind, right? It's not an insidious idea at the core of it. It's good, just like how, for example, the European Union is able to coexist a lot better because there's some kind of union there, right? In the same sense, people might think about the Ummah as a coalition of countries that not only would help defend themselves better because of this coalition, but improve things for the people inside. And if you believe that Islam is a guide politically, or it can help you do what's best for your people, it's not even about offensively going out and conquering other lands or something. It varies. So it's so tied in. It's difficult. And everything you said, I pretty much concur with that. And in general, I'm not sure how I feel about national identity as a concept, or being proud of being Arab. I'm not saying you should be ashamed of being Arab, but I don't know if it's not always good to just ride on the achievements of the generations before you, right? Like Americans, for example, being so proud of like gaining independence from the British, and then starting, a country where there's a lot of possibilities that can happen. Lingering on that point, it might not be that beneficial anymore. this kind of pride in something that you didn't even do, that you might be doing the opposite of, that you're not contributing to. So I have a lot of complicated feelings about that. So I don't know. I don't know if the concept itself I'm a proponent of, is that the word that I'm looking for? And I don't know how to reconcile it with being an ex-Muslim. But you could still enjoy a lot of things from your culture, your community, by being an ex-Muslim. Unfortunately, though, like I'll give you an example where culture and religion are kind of, they muddy the waters. I've been trying to watch more like series and movies from the Middle East, and it's hard to enjoy some of them because of the casual sexism, homophobia, racism, and it's not necessarily because they're like, I am Muslim, therefore, but a lot of it stems from the negative connotations based in Islam, on those groups. So it makes it difficult to identify with that and enjoy it. So it's complicated.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So Osiris was saying there's on the 22nd of February, 2022, there's an online protest, invitation to invite all spectrums of non-religious Arabic speakers to participate in a virtual digital demonstration on the internet. Just spreading the word, to express our presence and draw attention to our rights within our countries. I agree with that. I want to remind people it's not about let's get ex-Muslims out of the Middle East and into the West. As much as I support individual cases where, do what's best for you, for your well-being, we want to thrive for people to remain in their communities, to enable them to be able to do that and not have to let go of their home or their part of their identity just because they don't believe anymore, but they're forced to in many cases. So hopefully that changes things. Robert says, aren't there a lot of Arabs who aren't Muslim? Yeah, there are, and there are a lot that aren't. In percentages, though, Muslims are counted as Muslims by birth, right? You don't count atheists, you don't count ex-Muslims or converts. So the majority seem to be Muslim, but there's a lot of non-religious, and there's other religions as well. They're just a minority in most countries. Yeah, and there is
Oh, before we get to the next question, I just wanted to add something to
Sure.
the question about how do you reconcile, being ex-Muslim and being a proud Arab. I think for me, what I had to do was to try and identify the things that really resonated about me, that I found were part of who I am just as an Arab and being raised by Arab parents. And I mean, beyond the obvious things like Arabs, or like my background's Palestinian, like we have this unique heritage of food and music and art. I think there's definitely something to be said about an Arabic mindset or mentality and values. There's values too, like the emphasis on family and tradition and supporting each other. And I think Arabs, they come from some of the harshest environments, and they've been through some of the toughest experiences of being invaded and conquered and all that. So there's an admirable survival spirit too. So in my own way, I found a way to kind of find the positives about my background and the things that informed me in my upbringing that didn't have to do with Islam. But at the same time, Islam is so interwoven into everything that me liking something or liking someone is hard because Islam is inevitably fused into it. So it's not a resolved issue for me, is what I'm saying. So I'm proud in some ways. I kind of just want to distance myself in other ways. And I wish I had an answer. I think this is something that even like I have atheist relatives in my family who are much older than me, and they go through the same thing.
Yeah. I touched on pride in general in my mind. I don't know if I feel, it's hard to feel pride in a community because there's always negatives to that community, and you have to specify what you're proud of and what you're not proud of. Like, am I proud of ex-Muslims in general? In a sense, I'm proud of apostates in general, or anyone who challenges their own beliefs and goes against, the hardships that comes with actually standing your ground kind of thing. So in a sense, yes, but I can't even blanket say I'm proud of all ex-Muslims. I have pride in being not in that sense. No, I have pride in being able to, like, in a generalized sense, in apostates in general. But obviously, there's a lot of awful apostates too.
Well, you
Yeah.
don't know something about, like this is the thing with the atheist label too. You don't know anything about someone who's ex-Muslim or atheist beyond
Mhm.
the fact that they are ex-Muslim or they don't believe in a God.
Yeah, I agree with that. Mr. Monster, thanks again for the super chat. If Allah is truly all forgiving, wouldn't He forgive me for being skeptical, even if I didn't believe His existence on my deathbed? That's my logic, or was my logic when I did believe in God. It's kind of a transition phase. What do you think?
So I think there's ways of saying yes and no to that. So for the more progressive, less literalist Muslims, they'll say, well, the Allah that I believe in and I see from the Quran is so loving that no matter what the specifics are that are said, He would obviously forgive you because He loves you and wants the best for you. And then there are the others who say, yes, God forgives a lot, but there are limits to that love. And part of love is giving people the option and giving the people the option to do the wrong thing. And those people did the wrong thing and they should pay the consequences.
Yeah, it's hard to, like, that would follow if I actually believe that it is the wrong thing, like that I believe that it was unjustified to not believe in God and really beg Him and worship Him and stuff. But it's not that intentional act that they make it seem to be. And that's a in-group bias that's very obvious in other groups as well. Like you look at the others and you say they intend to be that way, and the way that they are is bad. And then it makes it easy to justify a lot of things. So if you truly think that God is all good and you truly understand that belief is not a choice or an intentional, malicious thing, you could even extend it to thinking, why is, again, it all boils down to, why is God so needy for that worship to the point of petty vengeance? If that person is good and they're not harming anybody, are they harming God through disbelief, or even belief but disobedience to worship Him? Are they, like, does God need revenge? Is He going to feel vindicated when he tortures that person? It takes you down, a path of thinking that I don't think most believers are capable of, not because of who they are, but because those who are capable of that usually end up leaving, not believing. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah. And I should clarify that the reason Aladdin is saying this is because he has been seduced by the Western prostitutes and alcohol and drugs and easy living.
And I gotta say, if someone's offended by the term prostitutes, don't forget that Muhammad Hijab keeps throwing around the term, and what else was it? And pimps and other stuff like that. So it's bizarre that guy pretends to be an intellectual, but also talks like I don't know, a weirdo. Still got a bunch of questions. I is saying, I wish Allah was a girl, I would have followed her. Do you think if God was, like, if this concept of God in most religions was a woman, women would have the upper hand?
That's an interesting question. I don't know.
I mean, men are physically stronger and stuff, but strength is not everything.
No. Have you ever heard, I'm not sure if this is actually established historically or documented, but I've heard things about how human societies actually used to be matriarchal. And then there was a shift to the patriarchal thing that we've had for the last several thousands of years.
I've heard about communities like that. I'm not sure if I read that it was, a more of a universal or majority thing, but I've heard about that, that it's possible at least.
Yeah, there are a lot of older religions that did give the primacy towards women because they're the ones from that give life. Like they're the ones that birth new life, and they needed to be protected. And so I think at one point in our past, we kind of operated like ants in the sense of we had the queen, we had to protect the queen, and then the males were just the drones that went hunting and were easily sacrificed. So
It's funny because in a king, like if a king is ruling, the males still are the drones and they have to be sacrificed.
Yeah, it's lose for us males,
Man,
unfortunately.
we're so oppressed.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know if that would be better for women, because then they would still be condemned to doing certain things, like, you have to give birth, you have to do this, you have to
I mean, maybe what if she's treated even better because she is the one who propagates life? I mean, that could be a view of it. A mother, a woman is the one who gives life. So why isn't God a woman who gives life?
yeah, and so you hear that, like, Mother Earth, Gaia,
Yeah.
and all that.
Yeah. Interesting. But it's interesting that in Islam, we keep getting told God is genderless, right? God is a they. God doesn't have physical like features, but then there's a bunch of descriptions of his shin and arm and his chair. And even like we use the word he, and I was told that that's because, or huwa, like the Arabic pronoun for him, or he. And I was told it's because of the limitations of the Arabic language. There is no like it for God. But that seems like a mighty convenient thing that God would reveal it in a language where he's a he.
And by giving pronouncements and promises of the paradise that seem to be
men.
geared towards the male.
Yep. And
male desires.
And also it seems offensive to those people if you call God a she. And sometimes I do that just to like make it a point, just like how a lot of writers now, instead of saying man is so and so, they say woman or human or something, or she. And they take offense to it. A lot of Muslims take offense to it, and maybe even Christians. But why? Why is it offensive to call God a she if it's a genderless concept? I don't know. We should do that more often. This is the Buddhist who wanted to join.
That's disappointing. Oh, well.
That's okay. Next time, hopefully. All right. Still got some comments. I'll try to get to as much of them as we can.
Yeah, I'm still good for time.
Yeah. Big H says, Aladdin, what do you like about Islam? I like cleaning after number 2 with water and seeing guests as a blessing. What do you think?
Oh, what do you like about Islam? I like cleaning after number. That's an interesting question.
Islam doesn't have a monopoly on that. However, it did propagate it, and I do give it credit for that. And I still have a bidet wherever I go.
See, that's the thing. I think Islam has a lot of good things. The only thing I would say is that I don't think any of those things are unique to Islam, or that you need to do them through Islam. But just to give like a couple of ideas of what I mean, I think the idea of the 5 times a day prayer is good. And if you kind of take it as a time to just take a break from your day-to-day life and just, meditate, or just, focus on your own internal wellness. I think that's what prayer offers a lot of Muslims. And I think that's a valuable thing, whether you're practicing or not. And I think the idea of Ramadan is actually very positive, in the sense of us thinking of those people who are not as fortunate as us to have food, and coming together as a community. And beyond that, even just having something like events to celebrate together is also important. It's just how it's tied to the toxic stuff that kind of ruins the whole thing.
Ramadan, I have mixed feelings about. What you mentioned is good, and I think sometimes we give too much credit to the whole thinking of the needy in Ramadan. Yes, there's more charity in Ramadan, and it's good that there's that uptick, in charity giving. But a lot of it is about excessiveness these days, and many could argue that's not what Islam preaches. So that's not my point.
It's I would argue that is a distortion of what it was intended to be.
Yeah. So that's not a critique of Islam in general. The excessiveness of these, showing off how big the banquet can be and then throwing out a lot of food, but giving away that food is a good idea. I like the idea of zakah, for example, however, with an asterisk there. I like that you don't have to necessarily like give a specific authority money and you kind of self-regulate it. People keep saying it's being a dhimmi and paying jizya is like zakat. It's not. That's a whole other topic. I don't like about zakat, which I discovered, not that long ago, maybe a couple years or within a year or two ago, that zakat has to go to Muslims. It does not count as zakat if you give it to non-Muslims. So that part I don't like. I mean, it's always good to.
Is that
sorry.
how it's actually defined in the? Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I mean, it's always good to give to your community. I'm not saying you shouldn't, like, as a human, you usually prioritize your people, so to speak. But if you have an opportunity to give charity somewhere else and it would count, that's not a bad idea. I think there's more rules to it, and that's why there's organizations that specifically take donation for zakah. As like that, it's a category. And usually some of these organizations are not strictly Islamic, but the Islamic ones are often focused on that. That part of it I don't like, but I like the concept itself, and it got me thinking I should be giving more to charity, and I've been giving more since I left Islam. And yeah, and yeah, that's when I noticed that I had like looked into why is there a different category for zakah, a category of like when you go to put your credit card and give money, there's a different button for the zakat category, and that's when I found out. Yeah. So that's like a brief overview of some of the things that I do find useful in Islam, but can be taught in other ways. But I suppose the obligation, the religious obligation, makes it kind of maybe more likely to happen. So that part of it is good.
That's a fair point. A friend of mine brought this up, that the thing is with people, when they aren't forced to do something or aren't obligated, might be the better word, they might never do them. So if we didn't have Ramadan as part of the thing that's prescribed to us, then would we do something like that on our own devices? And what I would say is the problem is that we for thousands of years have developed societies that are built like that. So built around, well, the religions tell us the things we're supposed to do, and we do all our rituals and celebrations through those religions as a way of making sure people do them. That doesn't mean that always has to be the case. And we can kind of do this thing where we transition out of that and do those things without needing a religious pretext to do them. It's just going to take time because we're not used to that yet.
And I want to add to that. That's why there should be more structured movements to not only replace those systems for the ones who left them, but kind of to invite other people into it. And it should be less cultish, because there should be no obligation to do it. There's no, like, if you don't join, you're not really losing anything. It's not mandated. But there should be movements that have some sort of label, that make it more structured, that advertise themselves that way, because we all know that charity giving is good, but without that reminder, a lot of people might just, forget about it. So we should learn from a lot of different religions and cultures and make new philosophies, and that could be politically pushed, or some kind of grassroots movement. So we need more work on that. But as ex-Muslims, for example, I am still doing a lot of work in the beginning stages of that. So ex-Christians or atheists who don't come from a Muslim background might have a head start on that. Like, they're less busy with the apostasy phases and talking about it and doing work there. So I hope they get a head start there, but I hope to see it from our communities as well.
Yeah, and it is coming. Like I mentioned earlier, like the ex-Muslims of North America, that's one example. This is all still very much recent. And I think with time, we're going to see it more and more, because people can see the need for those things that religions typically offer. Yeah,
I agree. Non-crazy cat lady, thank you for the super chat. Give your cats an extra cuddle from me. Will do. I mean, I don't know if I can give them any more. They would, they'll start to get sick of it. Okay. What else? I've seen some, there's a lot more comments still. I don't know if I agree with that. Cleaning after number 2. As with all things in Islam, making non-negotiable rules is problematic. Strict followers can't use bathrooms outside. I'm kind of conflicted. Yeah, like there might be people who actually think I cannot go to the washroom in a public setting because I have to do it that way. But I think the majority of Muslims are past that. Like, you can't reject your bodily functions. So that may not be that big of an issue.
Yeah. Well, like making non-negotiable rules is problematic. I do
Mm,
agree with that in a lot of ways. It always makes me think of like so I'm a millennial, and I think typically speaking, when you were raised by the previous generation, I guess it's the baby boomers. Anyway, so people from my generation, I don't know if you'd agree with this with me or not, Aladdin, but the way I was told something shouldn't be done was to be just told, "Oh, don't do that," and I'd ask why, and say just because I said so. So that's really the kind of religious way of saying something, and I think the best way to do that, instead of making a rule non-negotiable, is just to tell people, well, we have this practice, or we encourage this practice because, A, B, and C, and this is the benefit and this is the harm, and then let people come to their own educated choices.
mhm.
Obviously, that's going to be difficult to do, especially with people with different kinds of education levels and experiences and contexts, but I'd rather have that than a draconian overlord in the sky telling us what to do or not do, whether that's actually a god or just a government or
Well,
whatever it is.
touching on that, some Muslims have this idea that anything, well, I think all of them would say anything that God tells you to do is for your own benefit, in a sense.
Yeah.
Like it's good for you whether you know it or not. There's a wisdom behind it. Anything that God does to you, all that stuff. But sometimes I think I've gotten to that point with Muslims even saying some things are just you do it because God said so. It might not be like immediately or even in the future beneficial to you. There's not necessarily a hidden benefit, but you just do it because God said so. And yeah,
Which is the parent saying, because I said so, it is because it is.
yeah, because I know more than you. And I guess sometimes you need to get to that point with a child who's like,
It's like a frustrated parent.
yeah,
Last resort, really.
yep. All right, some more comments. Peter Parkour says,
Okay.
that's like the dollar store version of Peter Parker, the non-copyright version. As an ex-Muslim, the idea of marriage with a Muslim worries me since I don't want to pass on the trauma the religion brings to other generation. And I'm getting pressure to get married. Thoughts?
You
Yeah.
go first on that one.
I'm sorry that you are getting pressured. It's a difficult situation to be in general, and let alone when there's a secret factor involved, if you're not out of the closet, or even if you are and you're still being pressured regardless. That's very difficult. So I think your fear is justified. And my advice is not from a position of experience, but this is what I see. Your concern is more than justified because you don't want to bring someone to this world in a setting where you're not sure how you feel about your partner or how you're going to feel in the future if there's more friction caused by this. And you don't want to, without actual conviction and actual belief, preach something that you don't believe in. You're going to despise yourself possibly in the future and that person and your partner. So I think you should do your best to get out of that situation, because even if there's short-term ramifications, they're like it's the lesser of two evils of long-term damage to you and a new person. They're two new people at least. Yeah. What do you think?
I completely agree. I think if whether you're religious or non-religious, when you're starting a serious relationship, or when you reach the point where the relationship becomes serious, you have to have those discussions about what your beliefs are and how you would want them to be taught to your children, your future children, and come to some sort of agreement or consensus and then proceed. Because if there's an impasse, that's going to be a problem. And beyond just it being specific about kids, it's a good idea to get a sense of what those beliefs are and how they would be implemented with someone who's a believer if you're a non-believer, because I've heard horror stories of someone marrying someone who wasn't very religious, or maybe was mostly secular but still claimed to be practicing or whatever, and then once they became more serious or got married or had kids, they changed. And it's coming from a place where their values changed because they want to watch out for the interests of their future child, or
fear.
Fear. Yeah. So
it's a bad starting point.
I think, as Aladdin said, it's important to have those conversations and come to a resolution, whether it's a negative one in terms of the relationship ending or a positive one. better to have that short-term anguish or suffering than having much worse problems where multiple people are involved later on down the road.
Yeah, I can empathize with the difficulty in finding another ex-Muslim, and it's not that you necessarily need to find another ex-Muslim to find a good partner, but in many communities that's the only option, because the other option would be a religious person of another religion, or sometimes people have to, and I recommend not doing that, but if that's the best option for you, you should do that. Be closeted about your ex-Muslimness, you and your partner, if you're both on the same page about it, till you have some room to breathe and have some independence. In some communities and like in some situations, that's your best bet. So yeah, and it's difficult to try to find like some kind of dating app or platform, because that could be used to dox those people or harass them. It's very difficult. It's kind of like what the LGBT went through, even more so in the beginning phases. Yeah, so we do empathize. It's what you were talking about earlier. You phrased it better, which is you have to talk about your values and things like that and your beliefs. In this case, it's very obviously defined. If you know that person is a believer and you're not, that's, you could still have those conversations, but it's almost redundant. But in either way, like no matter what the person is, you need to have those conversations. And it's gotten to the point that I found myself on the first or second time meeting someone, like first or second date, we're discussing things like that. Not necessarily, you know, the whole why do you believe? That's a different conversation, but more like, what do you like? What are your values in general? And if someone says they're spiritual, for example, which I've seen that a lot more often, what does spirituality mean to you? I may not agree with it. I may not be spiritual in a sense, but it could just be humanism that they call spiritualism, right? Or it could just be inconsequential to me, and I don't mind if they believe in that. But if it's something far-fetched, like, ooh, spirits, and I have to like use this rock or something, then that's, you know, this salt or this mineral is speaking to me, then that's something else. Yeah.
Well, the way I would put it is, if you notice red flags in this area, even though you don't know all the information yet and you're still getting to know each other, if you're noticing a red flag from early on, it's probably going to be a more prominent issue later on that you're going to have to address. So you might as well figure out a way to address it as soon as possible.
Or just bail on it if it's, you know, don't try to change someone for you. I mean, maybe later you need to make compromises and so on, but don't start with compromises, especially when it comes to values and future directions of your life.
Agreed. Yeah.
I don't know what this is about. No, I'm not going to talk about that. Okay, couple more, because we're going to have to end soon. Thank you all for being here for this long. And again, I want to remind you, like, please, you know, like and subscribe if you would like to see more of this, because it does help us reach more people. I never thought I'd be one to ask for likes, but it's people sometimes don't realize. I personally, before I was a content creator, didn't realize that I simply wasn't doing it even if I loved the video. It's not necessarily something that always crosses your mind. So just a reminder, don't like it if you don't like it, you know, but if you do, just a reminder to tell me in that way.
No, it's a non-negotiable command.
Yeah, Aladdin says you have to. Simon says, okay, I'll take a few more comments, or like one or however much time permits. Let's see. As a Muslim, as a convert, you can't imagine Muslims not praying, fasting, etc. Islam is wonderful. Why not do it all? Kind of thinking. I hope I was not judgmental as a convert, now ex-convert. Not sure I understand.
Me neither, I have to admit.
Okay, I think if what they mean is you're maybe surprised, or like what they mean by judgmental.
Oh, okay.
Like, how could you be a Muslim and not pray and stuff? Yeah, that's how I felt as a Muslim. True. Like, and that's why some people are kind of pushy about it outwardly. They tell people you should be praying, you should be, because you've adopted it freshly, right?
Exactly. When I think when you're a convert and you kind of get this specific viewpoint of it, and you might not know all the ins and outs, I think there's a honeymoon phase where you really see Islam in this beautiful light, and it's just this new thing, and you just want to spend all your time with it, and then reality starts setting in, and you see how Muslims actually behave, and practice. For me, when I saw Muslims not, praying 5 times a day, or not fasting, or not doing whatever it is that Muslims are supposed to be doing, I just thought, oh, they're just the lapsed, lazy, sinner Muslims, and God will judge them when the time comes.
Yeah.
So
I wasn't
it comes
angry
in
about
phases.
it.
No, I was never
Yeah.
angry about it. I just thought, oh, they're just. It definitely came from a point of judgment, despite the la ikrah fi din, of like, oh, they're just weak. Oh, okay.
I mean, in my case, it wasn't even to the point.
I mean, I was weak too, so I hated myself for that as well.
Yeah, there's that, like, being critical of yourself. Like, here's something that I can sort of relate to. If someone has something that is called executive dysfunction, it comes with, for example, having ADHD, attention problems to some extent, and it is extremely difficult for you to do something that is not, like, immediately rewarding to you. For example, the rewards of prayer, or you believe in them, or maybe you don't believe in them, but you have to do it as an obligation. You may be more likely to focus on something that is productive or beneficial or rewarding at the moment, and it's not necessarily a sin, like something good, reading, instead of getting up and praying and interrupting your thoughts, and then you beat up yourself for it. You're like, why am I like this? Why is the shaitan so good at getting inside my head, when it's simply biology and psychology, and you're not even doing something wrong. You're prioritizing something that you see the benefits of, compared to a scare tactic. So yeah. Okay, so maybe this will be our last one. Sorry to everybody who I couldn't get to. I really am bookmarking them in sequence, but it's hard. Third time asking panel, sorry. Thoughts on determinism and how it invalidates religion because we have no free will. We kind of touched on that, I think.
Yeah, I think we did. Yeah.
I
I don't really have anything to add beyond what I already said. I would just quickly say that if you believe in an all-powerful, all-knowing God who's active in our day-to-day lives, you can't really have free will in that setting. And I would say we don't really have free will with or without there being a God. That's just my particular viewpoint that I don't think we'll have time to get into.
Yeah, pretty much same here. This question is interesting, but I can't fully answer it. Do you believe the Hadith and Quran mold neuroplasticity of a person to develop OCD, which can but always lead to violent acts on people, but not always? There's layers to that. So I think if they have OCD, it could exacerbate some of their problems. Like how, I think Muhammad may have had OCD, but I'm not diagnosing him with anything. The repetitiveness of things, the feeling, the obsessiveness or compulsiveness, and that extends to other, mental health conditions as well. It could be harmful. I don't know if neuroplasticity would allow it to become a thing from nothing. And I have no comment about the violence of it. I don't think so. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't really have an opinion on this either, unfortunately. Yeah. I don't know enough.
My general opinion is that there are issues that could be exacerbated by the nature of this one size fits all, in religion. And I think that's something we need to pay attention to, because there's a clause out of it sort of in Islam, which is, but God doesn't say do anything if it's like beyond your means, or like same in fasting. If you can't, then you shouldn't do it. Your health is more important. But how do you determine that till you get to the breaking point? And who gets to judge that without you having this self-imposed and outside imposed judgment of you're going to go to hell because you're doing the sin, right? So I think that's problematic. Yeah. Thank you, Really Shady, again for the super chat. Good discussion, and always appreciate your thoughts. Video over podcast.
Video over podcast. That seems to be the consensus.
Yeah, but this is not exactly like you could be listening and you'd get all the same benefit.
I have to be honest. There's been many times where I've just played your videos and just listen to them while I'm walking to the store or grocery shopping.
Thank you.
If people only knew what I was listening to as I was walking around.
Somebody said they were listening to it in the masjid. I was like, dude, just be careful. Don't play it like
that's next level. Yeah.
Yeah. Friendly Muslim might come on another time to speak to you, secular spirit. So we'll see about that. That's why I do some, like now I'm switching to some of them are just audio based. I might have on screen like a verse or something to, if you're watching, you get to see it, or if you want to pause and look at it, because I think it's more than enough. But if I make it a video and people are listening, then there's going to be visual effects. There's going to be things that you miss out on. So
Yeah.
I don't
think
want to
as long as you give like a visual element, I think that's what's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to put in the effort to make a video that, you know, put in a lot of energy into making it appealing as a video, when it could, in that case, there's just enough benefit of it being audio based. So I hope people still like try to take those two and actually consume them, because it would help me. It's hard to make a video visually appealing and put in all that time, when sometimes it's better to just give you the idea quicker. And it still takes time though. Like, yeah. Anyhow, yeah, I think we're going to end it here. Thank you everyone for your questions and for joining and your support. And please go follow Secular Spirit or subscribe to him. There's a link in the comments, because next week we're going to be doing one of these on his, well, a different kind of stream on his channel. So don't miss it. Yeah, it's not going to be here. So make it a point to go there and turn notifications and set the timer and everything. Any last thoughts you want to communicate?
No, not really. I just want to say thank you again for having me here.
Of course.
It was a pleasure. It's too bad that we didn't have more theists or believers calling in.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed the questions, and a lot of the questions were really, really interesting and provocative. And I hope that anyone watching got some value out of our responses.
Yeah. You know, what's funny is you and I had some of these chats in like voice notes or text way before.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So maybe we should stop talking offline, because we're taking away a lot of ideas that could be communicated on stream.
Yeah, that way it's more fresh.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. And, you know, take care as always. Think critically and think for yourself. Bye-bye.